The sun rose over the sleepy coastal town of Port Harwick, Maine, as Max's frantic barking cut through the morning fog. The German shepherd had been inconsolable since dawn, his powerful voice carrying across the mist-shrouded cemetery where Captain Nathan Reed's flag-draped coffin waited for the morning service. Max paced relentlessly around the casket, his nails clicking against the stone path, refusing to leave his post even when coaxed by Evelyn Reed, the captain's wife of 30 years. "That dog hasn't quieted since they brought him home," whispered Rebecca Reed, her voice breaking as she watched her father's faithful companion. "It's like he knows something we don't." Captain Reed, a decorated Navy SEAL and later intelligence operative, had reportedly died during a classified training exercise off the coast of Norfolk just 8 days ago. When Thomas Blackwood, Nathan's lifelong friend and former naval investigator, finally convinced Evelyn to examine the coffin, their world shattered like glass striking stone. The polished oak casket meant to hold the body of a fallen hero was completely empty, except for a folded note tucked into the satin lining. In the distance, a grey sedan's engine roared to life, tires spraying gravel as it disappeared into the coastal fog. Max's barking suddenly ceased, replaced by a low, threatening growl. The Reed family home perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Port Harwick, Maine. The three-story Victorian with its weathered blue paint and wraparound porch had stood for over a century, witnessing the comings and goings of generations of naval officers. For the past 32 years, it had been home to the Reed family, a place where the sea and service were part of daily life. Evelyn Reed, now 58, had maintained the property with meticulous care since her husband's first deployment, channeling her worry into creating a perfect home to which he could always return. Family photographs covered nearly every surface. Nathan in his dress whites at the Naval Academy graduation, young Rebecca in her father's captain's hat, Nathan and Evelyn dancing at their silver anniversary celebration 5 years earlier, and countless images of happier times. Nathan Reed at 60 had been the picture of military discipline, his back still straight as a mast, his blue eyes still sharp as they had been in his youth. Though his once black hair had turned silver, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who commanded respect without demanding it. His most loyal companion, Max, had been by his side for 7 years. The German shepherd was no ordinary pet, but a specially trained military canine who had served alongside Nathan during his final years of active duty. The dog possessed an intelligence that made Evelyn sometimes wonder if he understood English better than some people she knew. Rebecca Reed, 29, had followed her father into naval intelligence, though she'd taken a more technical path, specializing in cryptography rather than field operations. Her apartment in Washington, D.C. sat empty now, as she had rushed home at the news of her father's death, taking emergency leave from her classified position at the Pentagon. She'd inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's determined spirit, a combination that had served her well in a male-dominated field. Thomas Blackwood, Nathan's oldest friend since their days at Annapolis, lived in a modest cabin just down the coast. A former naval investigator turned maritime security consultant, Thomas had seen the darker side of military operations throughout his career. He'd watched the Reed family weather previous storms, including Nathan's capture during a covert operation 15 years ago. He'd sworn then to always protect Evelyn and Rebecca, a promise that now weighed on him like an anchor. Admiral James Harrington, commanding officer of Nathan's last unit, had maintained close ties with the family throughout their careers. He'd mentored Nathan, guided his ascent through the ranks, and been there for Evelyn during deployments and crises. His steel-grey hair and weathered face spoke of decades at sea. But lately, something in his eyes suggested he carried burdens that were becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The quiet coastal town, with its lighthouse, small fishing fleet, and colonial architecture, seemed an unlikely setting for the events about to unfold. Yet beneath the postcard-perfect facade, decades-old secrets were beginning to surface with the incoming tide. The morning Max's barking changed everything. This carefully maintained world began to unravel, revealing that the bonds of family, loyalty, and duty were about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. 1 week earlier, on a foggy Tuesday morning, Evelyn Reed received the visit every military spouse dreads. Admiral Harrington stood on her doorstep, his face grave, accompanied by a chaplain. Max, usually friendly toward the Admiral, hung back in the hallway, his posture rigid and alert. "Evelyn," Harrington began, removing his cap. "I regret to inform you that Nathan was killed during a classified training exercise yesterday afternoon." His voice, accustomed to commanding ships, faltered slightly. It was instantaneous. He didn't suffer. Evelyn gripped the doorframe, her world tilting off its axis. "No," she whispered. "Not Nathan." Her knees buckled, but Harrington caught her before she fell. The days that followed passed in a blur of grief and formality. The official report cited an equipment malfunction during underwater operations, but Evelyn, who had been a Navy wife for 3 decades, sensed inconsistencies in the story. The night before his final mission, Nathan had called her, his voice tense in a way she hadn't heard since his capture 15 years ago. "Evelyn, if anything happens, there's something you need to know about what I've been working on these past months," he had said. The connection deteriorated before he could finish, and that was the last time she heard his voice. The Navy handled all funeral arrangements with unusual haste. When Evelyn requested to view her husband's body, she was told. The nature of the accident made it inadvisable. Admiral Harrington personally assured her that a closed casket would be more appropriate. "Your husband died a hero, Evelyn," Harrington had said, resting his hand on her shoulder. "Some aspects of his service must remain classified, but never doubt his courage or his love for you and Rebecca, but something felt profoundly wrong to both Evelyn and Rebecca." Max refused to eat, spending hours staring at Nathan's photograph on the mantel. The dog's behavior grew increasingly agitated as the days passed, especially when naval officers visited with condolence calls. The morning before the funeral, while sorting through Nathan's personal effects, Rebecca found a crumpled note in her father's uniform pocket. In her father's distinctive handwriting were the words, "Trust Max. He's been trained for this contingency." Rebecca showed the note to her mother, both of them puzzled, but clinging to this final message. The Reed home, filled with the somber business of funeral preparations. Evelyn moved through these days mechanically, selecting flowers, approving the service program, and accepting casseroles from neighbors. Each decision felt like another nail in a coffin she wasn't permitted to open. Thomas Blackwood remained close. Through it all, handling phone calls and visitors when the Reed women couldn't face them. With his investigator's eye, he noticed peculiarities. The military's insistence on specific funeral arrangements, the constant presence of unmarked cars on their street, and most troublingly, the way Admiral Harrington's aides seemed to monitor their every move. "Something doesn't add up, Evelyn," Thomas confided one evening, keeping his voice low. "I've investigated enough mishaps to know when details aren't aligning." Rebecca was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "What if Dad isn't really dead?" she asked, examining her father's last official photograph. The image showed Nathan at a medal ceremony 3 months earlier, and she noticed something she hadn't before, a tension in his eyes, a guardedness that reminded her of his expression after returning from captivity 15 years ago. Max paced the house restlessly, refusing to leave the coffin once it arrived. The German shepherd's behavior turned increasingly deliberate. He began carrying Nathan's possessions to Evelyn. First his Naval Academy ring, then his favorite, book on maritime strategy, and finally persistently nudging at a locked safe in Nathan's study that neither Evelyn nor Rebecca had been able to open. "He's trying to tell us something," Rebecca observed, watching Max scratch at the safe. "Dad trained him to alert us if something was wrong. That's what the note meant." The morning of the funeral, Max's actions became more urgent. He stationed himself beside the coffin in the front parlor, his posture alert and intense. When Commander Phillips, Nathan's executive officer, arrived early to review the funeral protocols, Max's behavior shifted dramatically. The normally friendly dog positioned himself between Phillips and the coffin, his hackles raised, a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. "Perhaps he should be confined during the service," Phillips suggested, eyeing the dog warily. Emotions run high at these times, and animals can be unpredictable. But Evelyn remembered Nathan's note. "Trust Max. He's been trained for this contingency." At dawn, Max's barking took on a new intensity. It wasn't the sorrowful cry of a dog missing his master. It was the sharp, urgent bark he used during training exercises when he discovered something critical. He ran between the coffin and the window, then back to Evelyn and Rebecca, his actions becoming more insistent with each pass. "He's never been wrong," Thomas said quietly, watching Max's determined behavior. "In all my years in naval investigation, I've learned to trust trained military dogs. They sense things we don't." Evelyn stood, her grief momentarily overshadowed by a widow's intuition and a naval officer's wife's experience with classified operations. Something about Max's desperate attempts to communicate, combined with Nathan's cryptic last phone call and the hidden note, stirred the strategic mind. She'd developed over decades of supporting her husband's career. "Open it," she whispered to Thomas, moving toward the coffin. "We need to know what Max is trying to tell us." With trembling hands, Thomas unlocked the coffin's clasps, while Rebecca held Max close, her heart pounding against her ribs. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the parlor as they carefully lifted the heavy oak lid. "Dear God," Thomas whispered, his face draining of color. The coffin's satin lining was pristine, undisturbed, and completely empty except for a small piece of paper tucked into the corner. Rebecca reached for it with shaking fingers. The note, in Nathan's unmistakable handwriting, contained just 3 words. "History repeats itself." Rebecca's legs gave way beneath her as she sank to the floor, Max immediately pressing against her side. The room seemed to spin as 15-year-old memories resurfaced with startling clarity. Nathan's capture during a classified operation, the same hasty funeral arrangements before he was found alive, the same insistence on a closed casket, the same secretive glances exchanged among naval officials. "They're connected," she breathed, her analyst's mind racing. Dad wasn't investigating just anything. He was investigating what happened 15 years ago. Through the window, they caught sight of movement. A grey sedan parked across the street, its engine idling. 2 men in dark suits emerged, moving with the distinctive precision of military or intelligence operatives. "Evelyn, get the safe," Thomas ordered, his investigator instincts kicking in. "Whatever's going on, we need to move now." Max's growl deepened as footsteps approached the front door. Evelyn grabbed Nathan's note and rushed to his study, frantically trying to remember any combination he might have used for the safe. Rebecca followed, her mind racing through possibilities. "Try your wedding anniversary," Thomas suggested, keeping watch at the window. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she dialed 07-1662. The safe remained locked. "The coordinates of where you first met," Rebecca suggested, remembering her father's romantic streak beneath his military exterior. 3853N, 67-1228W. The safe clicked open. Inside lay a sealed manila envelope marked, "For Evelyn, if they say I'm dead again." a small electronic device that looked like a modified flash drive, and a set of keys with a tag reading Safe House Alpha. The sound of the front door opening sent adrenaline coursing through their veins. Admiral Harrington's voice called out, but it lacked its usual warmth. "Evelyn? Rebecca? We need to talk about Nathan." They crept along the back hallway, Max leading the way with practiced stealth. The dog moved as if he'd done this before, and Rebecca realized he had been trained for exactly this type of situation. In the distance, more vehicles were arriving, tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Thomas guided them toward the cellar door, keeping to the shadows. "My boat is docked behind your property," he whispered. "Nathan asked me last month to keep it fueled and ready. He knew this day might come." Evelyn clutched the envelope and device to her chest, her mind racing. Both her husband's capture and his apparent death had occurred under identical circumstances 15 years apart. This was no coincidence. The Navy's careful orchestration, the surveillance, Max's training, all pointed to something massive, something that had been in motion since before Rebecca was born. "Whatever this is," she said, her voice steadying with resolve. "It started 15 years ago when Nathan was captured, and now he's found something they don't want revealed." Max's ears perked up as the sound of multiple footsteps filled the "Read home," naval officers efficiently sweeping through the rooms. Through the small cellar window, Evelyn watched Admiral Harrington directing his men with uncharacteristic tension in his movements. "Full sweep of the premises," Harrington ordered, his voice carrying across the morning air. "They can't have gone far. And remember, Mrs. Reed and her daughter are not to be harmed. They're as much victims here as anyone." Commander Phillips emerged from the house, holding Max's training toy. "Sir, the dog's trail is fresh. They left minutes ago." He paused, examining the toy closely. "And there's something else. We found signs that the safe has been emptied." Harrington's face darkened. "That complicates things. If they have the contents of the safe..." He pulled out his phone, speaking in hushed tones. "Operation Neptune's Echo is compromised. 15 years of work at risk." "Yes, sir. Understanding." From their hiding place in the cellar, Evelyn clutched the manila envelope tighter, beginning to understand the significance. Thomas motioned toward the back door that led out to the cliffside path, but they had to wait for the patrol to pass. "Evelyn," Thomas whispered, "whatever's in that envelope and on that drive, Nathan risked everything to get it to you. We need to honor that trust." A new voice joined the search party outside, a voice that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Captain Lawrence Webber of Naval Intelligence, the same man who had handled Nathan's case 15 years ago when he was captured. He hadn't aged well, his thin frame even more gaunt, but his commanding presence remained unchanged. "Admiral," Webber called out, his voice carrying a sharp edge, "this is no longer your operation. My team takes over from here." He surveyed the area with cold efficiency. "Mrs. Reed and her daughter must be found before they open that envelope. 15 years of secrets don't unravel today." Evelyn's hands trembled as she gripped the envelope. The same man, the same situation, a decade and a half apart. She thought of Nathan's last words on the phone. "Something you need to know about what I've been working on these past months." The pieces were starting to align, forming a picture she wasn't sure she was ready to see. Thomas's cellar had a back exit leading to a narrow path down to the water. It was their only chance. Max seemed to understand, positioning himself to lead the way. The dog's military training was revealing itself in layers. He wasn't just Nathan's companion, he was his fail-safe, trained to protect his family if history indeed repeated itself. "On my signal," Thomas breathed, watching the search pattern of the men outside. When they round the corner, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a set of boat keys with a familiar emblem, the same one that was engraved on Nathan's wedding ring. Rebecca nodded, understanding flooding her features. Her father hadn't just predicted this moment, he had planned for it. Every detail, down to Max's training, had been orchestrated for this exact scenario. Thomas's boat, a sturdy, fishing vessel named Second Chance, was moored at a small private dock below the cliff. The path down was treacherous, especially in the morning fog, but Max navigated it confidently, pausing occasionally to ensure his humans were following safely. As they reached the dock, Rebecca caught sight of dark figures appearing at the top of the cliff path. There was no time to lose. They boarded quickly, Thomas starting the engine with practiced efficiency. As they pulled away from the shore, Evelyn finally allowed herself a moment to process what was happening. "He's alive," she whispered, looking at the envelope in her hands. "Nathan's alive." Rebecca squeezed her mother's shoulder, her own emotions. A tangled mess of hope, confusion, and determination. "We'll find him, Mum." The vessel glided through the fog, putting distance between them and the Reed home. When they were safely away from shore, Thomas set the autopilot and joined Evelyn and Rebecca in the small cabin. "We should be safe for now," he said, checking his watch. "I'm taking us to a small island about 40 miles offshore. Nathan and I used it sometimes for fishing trips, but I suspect it might be more than that." Evelyn carefully opened the manila envelope, her heart pounding. Inside was a letter dated just 1 week before Nathan's reported death, along with several photographs and what appeared to be coordinates. "My dearest Evelyn," she read, her voice shaking slightly. "If you're reading this, they've made me disappear again. But I am not dead, just as I wasn't dead 15 years ago when they took me." Rebecca moved closer, reading over her mother's shoulder as Max settled at their feet, his mission to get them safely away accomplished. 15 years ago, I discovered something within our Naval Intelligence Division, a network of officers and officials selling classified technology and intelligence to private military contractors and foreign entities. I was captured not by enemy combatants, as you were told, but by our own people. They needed to silence me while they assessed how much I knew. Evelyn paused, her hand covering her mouth as the implications sank in. All those years, the story they'd been told about, Nathan's heroic escape from enemy captivity, had been a fabrication. When they realized I hadn't shared my suspicions with anyone, they staged my rescue and return. I was sworn to secrecy under threat to your safety and Rebecca's future. For 15 years I played along, watching, gathering evidence, working my way into their confidence. 3 months ago, I discovered their largest operation yet, Project Neptune's Echo, involving weapons technology that could shift the balance of global naval power. Thomas leaned forward, his expression grim. Neptune's Echo. I've heard whispers, something about acoustic technology that could disable submarine detection systems. The flash drive contains everything, Nathan's letter continued. Evidence, names, locations, operation details, but it's encrypted. Only Rebecca has the knowledge to access it safely. The key is the same one she used for her cryptography thesis. The one based on the poem I taught her as a child. Rebecca's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The Seafarer," she whispered, recalling the old English poem her father had made her memorize when she was 12, claiming it would connect her to her naval heritage. Now she realized it had been preparation for this moment. "There's more," Evelyn said, continuing to read. "Captain Weber heads their operation, with Commander Phillips as his second. Admiral Harrington is not involved. He's been kept in a dark, fed partial truths to maintain operational security. He believes he's protecting national interests, but he's being used." "That explains his behavior," Thomas muttered. "He's following orders without knowing the full picture." "The coordinates will lead you to me," the letter concluded. "Trust Max. He knows the way once you reach the island. Trust Thomas. He's been helping me gather evidence. I'm sorry for the pain you're about to endure, but it was the only way to keep you safe while I finish this. All my love, Nathan." Evelyn folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. 15 years of subtle lies, of watching her husband carry a burden he couldn't share, of believing a story crafted to protect her. It was almost too much to process. Max whined softly, resting his head on Evelyn's knee as if sensing her distress. Rebecca sat in stunned silence, the weight of her father's revelation settling on her shoulders. "He encrypted everything knowing I'd be the only one who could decode it," she finally said. "He was protecting the information and creating a breadcrumb trail only we could follow." Thomas checked their course, his weathered face set with determination. "We have about 3 hours until we reach the island. You should try to decode that drive. They'll be tracking us, and we need to know what we're dealing with." As Rebecca took out her laptop and plugged in the drive, Evelyn stared out at the fog-shrouded ocean. Somewhere out there, Nathan was waiting, counting on them to unravel 15 years of deception and bring the truth to light. Max moved to the cabin door, his posture alert as he gazed in the direction they were heading. The German shepherd seemed to understand they were on their way to his master. For the first time since Nathan's death, his tail gave a slight, hopeful wag. The small fishing vessel cut through increasingly choppy waters as darkening clouds gathered on the horizon. Rebecca worked intently at her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she attempted to crack her father's encryption. The flash drive had revealed a complex security system that would permanently erase its contents after 3 failed attempts. "Dad didn't take any chances," she muttered, carefully analyzing the encryption pattern. The first layer had been relatively simple, the dates of significant family events arranged in a specific sequence. But the second level required something more personal, more deeply embedded in their shared history. Evelyn paced the small cabin, periodically checking their course on the navigation system. "Thomas, we've got company," she called, suddenly pointing to a blip on the radar screen. "Fast-moving vessel about 5 miles behind us," Thomas grimaced, adjusting their heading slightly. "Coast Guard cutter, most likely. Weber wouldn't waste time." He increased their speed, though the fishing boat was no match for a military vessel in open water. "We need to use the weather to our advantage." The approaching storm, while dangerous, offered their best chance at evasion. Thomas steered them toward the darkest section of clouds, where visibility would be most compromised. Max watched the older man work, occasionally glancing back toward the pursuing vessel with a low growl. "I think I've got it," Rebecca said suddenly, her voice tight with excitement. The Seafarer poem was just the first key. The actual cipher is based on the coordinates of naval battles Dad taught me about as a kid. Her fingers moved swiftly, inputting a complex sequence of numbers. The drive's interface transformed, revealing dozens of folders labeled with dates spanning the past 15 years. "My God," she whispered as she opened the first file. "It's all here. Operation reports, financial transactions, recorded conversations." She clicked on an audio file dated 3 years earlier. Captain Weber's voice filled the cabin. The Neptune's Echo prototype exceeded expectations. Lockheed is offering $80 million for the core technology. Another voice, Commander Phillips, responded, "The Chinese bid is higher but riskier. Recommend we segment the technology, sell components to different buyers." Thomas's face hardened as he listened. "They're selling classified naval acoustic technology to multiple bidders, including foreign powers. The technology could render submarine detection systems obsolete." "That's treason," Evelyn said softly, the weight of Nathan's burden becoming clearer. Rebecca continued exploring the files, her cybersecurity training helping her navigate the extensive documentation. "Dad's been gathering evidence for years, documenting everything. Financial records showing payments to offshore accounts, meeting transcripts, even surveillance photos. She opened another folder labeled Neptune's Echo Phase 2. "They're planning something bigger," she said after scanning several documents. "Phase 2 involves some kind of demonstration next week, something that will drive up the bidding war between interested parties." The boat lurched suddenly as a massive wave struck its side. Thomas fought with the wheel, keeping them on course. "The storm's getting worse," he called out, "and our friends are still following, though they've dropped back a bit." Max barked once, then moved to the cabin door, pawing at it insistently. "What is it, boy?" Evelyn asked, moving to open the door despite the spray coming over the bow. The German shepherd stepped out, his nose testing the air, then looked back at Evelyn and barked again. "He wants us to follow him," Rebecca said, securing her laptop in a waterproof case. "That's his signal bark." Evelyn checked the GPS coordinates against the ones in Nathan's letter. "We're approaching the island. Thomas, see that outcropping?" She pointed to a rocky formation barely visible through the storm. "That must be it." Thomas nodded, guiding the boat toward what appeared to be a small, uninhabited island with steep, rocky cliffs and dense vegetation. No dock or obvious landing point was visible, which would have made it seem uninviting to casual visitors. "There," Thomas said suddenly, pointing to a narrow opening in the rocks, a hidden cove invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Classic Nathan. He always said the best hiding spots are the ones hiding in plain sight. As they carefully navigated the treacherous passage, the pursuing vessel fell back, either unwilling to risk the dangerous approach in the storm or unable to spot the concealed entrance. The cove opened into a sheltered natural harbor, surprisingly calm compared to the churning seas outside. A small, well-camouflaged dock came into view, with a narrow path leading up the rocky hillside. Max leaped from the boat the moment they were close enough, bounding up the path with purpose. "He knows where he's going," Rebecca observed as Thomas secured the boat. "Dad must have brought him here before." They followed the German shepherd up the path, the rain easing as they climbed. The island wasn't large, perhaps a mile across at its widest point, but its steep terrain and dense vegetation made it feel like a natural fortress. Max led them to what appeared to be a solid rock face covered with vines and moss, then sat down and barked 3 times in rapid succession. "There's nothing here," Thomas said, bewildered. Evelyn stepped forward, examining the rock face more closely. "Wait." She pushed aside some of the vines, revealing a small, weathered metal plate. "It's a scanner." She pressed her palm against it, but nothing happened. "Let me try," Rebecca said, placing her hand on the plate. "Again, nothing," Max whined, then used his paw to scratch at a specific spot on the ground. Thomas knelt down, brushing away leaves and dirt to uncover a small waterproof container. Inside was a weathered brass key with the Reed family crest. "Of course," Evelyn murmured, taking the key. "Sometimes the oldest technology is the most reliable." She located a nearly invisible keyhole in the rock face and inserted the key. A soft click echoed, and a section of the rock swung inward, revealing a passage. Max trotted inside without hesitation, disappearing into the darkness. The humans followed more cautiously, Thomas pulling out a flashlight to illuminate what turned out to be a short tunnel opening into a surprisingly well-equipped living space carved into the heart of the island. Solar-powered lights flickered on automatically as they entered, revealing a compact but functional hideaway. A communications station occupied one wall, with multiple monitors currently dark. A small living area, sleeping quarters, and what appeared to be a medical station completed the space. The air was cool, but not damp, with an efficient ventilation system evident in the gentle circulation. "Nathan built all this?" Thomas whispered in awe. "Not alone," said a new voice from a doorway they hadn't noticed. "I helped." They turned to find Admiral Harrington standing there, his uniform exchanged for civilian clothes, his expression grave. But relieved, Max bounded over to him, tail wagging in recognition. "Admiral?" Evelyn gasped, instinctively stepping in front of Rebecca. "It's all right, Evelyn," Harrington said, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. "I'm not with Weber. I never was." "Prove it," Thomas demanded, his hand moving toward his belt where Evelyn knew he kept a small sidearm. "Neptune's Echo is a black project developed to sell classified acoustic technology to private contractors and foreign governments," Harrington recited. "Nathan discovered it 15 years ago when he found discrepancies in the naval intelligence budget. He was captured by our own people, not enemy combatants, and forced to cooperate under threat to his family." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "That information is on the drive. You could have taken it from us at any point." Harrington nodded toward a passageway behind him. "Perhaps you'll believe him." From the shadows emerged Nathan Reed, older and thinner than in his photographs, with a scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there before. His silver hair was longer than regulation would allow, and a short beard covered his normally clean-shaven face, but his blue eyes, piercing and intelligent, were unmistakable. "Nathan," Evelyn whispered, frozen in place for an instant before rushing forward. Her husband wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly as if afraid she might disappear. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry for everything." Max circled them excitedly, his mission complete. He had successfully reunited his family. Rebecca stood back, tears streaming down her face as she watched her parents' reunion. A moment she had stopped believing would ever come. When Nathan finally released Evelyn, he turned to his daughter, his eyes filled with regret and pride. "Rebecca, you decoded the drive." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Then she stepped forward and slapped him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the underground chamber like a gunshot. Max whined softly. 15 years, Rebecca's voice shook with emotion. 15 years of half-truths and secrets. Do you have any idea what Mom went through? What I went through? Nathan accepted the blow without flinching. "I deserve that," he said quietly. "I deserve much worse." "Where have you been this time?" Evelyn demanded, her initial joy at seeing him alive now tempered by 15 years of questions. "It's been nearly 2 weeks since your death. Gathering the final pieces," Nathan explained, leading them to the communication station where he activated the monitors. "Weber discovered I was getting too close to their operation. They tried to eliminate me permanently this time, not just stage a disappearance. If it hadn't been for James, I've been suspicious of Weber for years," Admiral Harrington admitted, "but he's careful, connected. I couldn't move against him without proof. When Nathan came to me 6 months ago with what he'd found, we realized how deep this went." Rebecca set her laptop on the console, connecting it to Nathan's system. "The drive has everything, doesn't it? Not just records of past sales, but evidence of what they're planning." Nathan nodded grimly. "Neptune's Echo Phase 2. They're planning to demonstrate the technology's effectiveness by temporarily disabling the sonar systems of an entire carrier group during exercises next week. The glitch will be blamed on Chinese interference, justifying increased defense spending while simultaneously driving up the price for their black market technology. The potential buyers include private military contractors, foreign governments, even terrorist organizations," Harrington added. "The technology could shift the balance of naval power overnight." Thomas let out a low whistle. "No wonder they're desperate to stop us." "They don't know about this place," Nathan assured them. "The island was my personal fishing retreat for years before I converted it. Only James knew about it." Evelyn studied her husband's face, seeing the toll the years of deception had taken. "Nathan, why didn't you tell me? After you came back 15 years ago, why continue the charade?" Nathan's shoulders slumped slightly. "They were watching us, Evelyn. Constantly. If you'd shown any sign of knowing the truth, they would have eliminated the threat. Your genuine reaction to my capture and return was what kept you safe." He took her hands in his. I've spent 15 years trying to gather enough evidence to bring them down without putting you and Rebecca at risk. And now, Rebecca asked, her anger giving way to her analyst's focus on the problem at hand. Now we finish this, Harrington said firmly. We have everything we need to expose Webber's entire operation. The challenge is getting the evidence to the right people before Webber realizes what we have. Max suddenly raised his head, ears perked toward the entrance tunnel. A low growl built in his throat. We have company, Nathan said, moving swiftly to a security monitor that showed the approach to the hidden door. Multiple boats landing on the north side of the island. Webber's found us. The security monitor showed 6 armed men in tactical gear making their way up the island's northern slope. They moved with military precision, fanning out to cover maximum ground. They're using a grid search pattern, Nathan observed, his military training evident in his quick assessment. But they don't know exactly where we are. The storm has compromised their thermal imaging. Admiral Harrington moved to a cabinet, retrieving a satellite phone. We need to contact NCIS directly. This evidence has to reach Admiral Curtis at Naval Command. Curtis is compromised, Nathan countered, pulling up a file on one of the monitors. He's been receiving payments through the same shell company as Webber. Rebecca examined the approaching forces on the monitor. We have maybe 20 minutes before they sweep this area. Nathan nodded, turning to a hidden panel in the wall. He pressed his palm against it, revealing a weapons cache. I've prepared for this contingency. He distributed sidearms to Thomas and Harrington, hesitating when he looked at Evelyn. She met his gaze steadily. 15 years as a single parent taught me to handle myself, Nathan. She took the weapon with practiced ease. Rebecca and I both completed advanced self-defense training after your capture. A flicker of pain crossed Nathan's face, followed by pride. Of course you did. Max paced anxiously by the entrance, his training evident in his controlled alertness. Nathan knelt beside the German shepherd, scratching behind his ears. Good boy, he murmured. You did exactly what you were trained to. You brought them to me. Rebecca was rapidly copying files from her father's system, creating backup after backup on secure drives. We need a way to transmit this data immediately, somewhere public where it can't be buried. The Pentagon's secure servers are our best option, Harrington suggested. Thomas shook his head. Too risky. If Webber has as many people on his payroll as this suggests, they could intercept or delete the files before they reach anyone trustworthy. What about the media? Evelyn proposed. Multiple outlets simultaneously? Nathan considered this. It's messy but effective, especially if we include certain senators on the Armed Services Committee in the distribution. A crash from outside made them all freeze. Max's growl deepened as dust drifted down from the ceiling. They're using explosives to speed up their search, Nathan said grimly. We're out of time. We need to move. He moved to another wall panel, revealing a narrow passage. This leads to the south side of the island. There's an emergency boat hidden in a sea cave there. We'll split up, Harrington decided. Creates multiple targets, increases our chances of getting the evidence out. Nathan nodded in agreement. Rebecca, you take the main drive with your mother and Admiral Harrington. Use the emergency boat. Thomas and I will create a diversion, draw them toward the north end of the island. Absolutely not, Evelyn said firmly. We just found you. We're not separating again. Mom's right, Rebecca added. Splitting up is exactly what they'd expect. Together, we have a better chance. A sudden explosion, much closer this time, rocked the hideout. The lights flickered momentarily. They've found the entrance tunnel, Thomas warned, checking the security monitor. 3 minutes tops. Nathan made a quick decision. Thomas, take point through the escape tunnel. James, your rear guard. Rebecca in the middle with the data. Evelyn and I will be on flanks. He looked at Max, and Max on scout. As if understanding his role, The German Shepherd immediately moved to the escape passage, nose testing the air for threats. They moved swiftly through the narrow tunnel, its rough-hewn walls occasionally brushing their shoulders. The passage sloped downward, taking them deeper into the island's heart before gradually rising again. The sound of surf grew louder as they approached the exit. Max suddenly stopped, his posture rigid. A low, nearly inaudible growl rumbled in his chest. Nathan raised his fist, signaling everyone to halt. He moved forward carefully, joining Max at a bend in the tunnel. After a moment of listening, he returned to the group. "Two men at the exit," he whispered. "They must have anticipated the escape route." "Can we go back?" Rebecca asked. Thomas shook his head. "The main entrance is already compromised." Nathan's mind raced through options. "We still have surprise on our side. Max can create a diversion." Evelyn squeezed his arm. "The data is what matters. If Weber gets his hands on it, everything you've sacrificed will be for nothing." After 15 years of separation and secrets, Nathan found himself once again trusting his wife's judgment. "You're right. We need a new plan." Admiral Harrington removed his satellite phone from a waterproof case. "The tunnel blocks the signal, but if I can get to higher ground, I can contact my secure team at Norfolk." "Who you can trust on that team?" Thomas asked skeptically. "My daughter," Harrington replied. "Commander Harrington. She's been running counterintelligence on Weber for months, gathering her own evidence independently." Nathan's eyes widened slightly. "You've been conducting a parallel investigation?" Harrington nodded grimly. "After what happened to you 15 years ago, I wasn't taking any chances. When you approached me 6 months ago, it confirmed my suspicions." A distant explosion echoed through the tunnel. Weber's team had breached the hideout. "They'll find the tunnel any minute," Rebecca warned. Nathan made a swift decision. "New plan. Thomas, you and James head for the north point of the island, drawing attention away from us. Make it look like you have the drive. Evelyn, Rebecca, Max, and I will take the emergency boat." Thomas nodded, checking his weapon. "Just like Sarawak in '98. "Let's hope this ends better," Nathan replied with a grim smile. As Thomas and Harrington prepared to double back through a side passage Nathan indicated, Evelyn quickly embraced the Admiral. "Be careful, James. You too, Evelyn." He turned to Nathan. "I'll see you at the rendezvous point in 6 hours." After they departed, Nathan led his family and Max forward cautiously. At the bend where the tunnel would soon open onto the sea cave, he paused. "Max," he whispered, giving a hand signal. The German Shepherd immediately understood, moving silently ahead. Nathan turned to Evelyn and Rebecca. "When Max creates the diversion, we move immediately, no hesitation." They waited in tense silence until a sudden commotion erupted outside, barking, shouting, and what sounded like a man hitting the water with a splash. "Now!" Nathan urged, leading them around the bend. They emerged into a sea cave where morning light filtered through an opening just large enough for a small boat. 2 agents were indeed present, but one was floundering in the water where Max had apparently driven him, while the other was frantically trying to get a bead on the fast-moving German Shepherd. Nathan took advantage of the chaos, swiftly disarming the second agent, while Evelyn secured the first as he climbed back onto the rocky ledge, sputtering and disoriented. "The boat's there." Nathan pointed to what appeared to be just another rock formation, but was actually a camouflaged craft. He quickly uncovered it, revealing a sleek, military-grade inflatable boat with an ultra-quiet motor. They boarded swiftly, Max jumping in last, soaking wet, but looking immensely satisfied with himself. "Good boy," Rebecca praised, wrapping an arm around the dog's strong neck as Nathan started the engine. The boat glided silently through the narrow opening into the open sea, the storm having passed enough to leave a heavy mist that provided perfect cover. "Head south," Rebecca suggested, consulting a compass app on her phone. "If Weber's main Horses landed on the north side. That gives us the best chance of slipping away undetected. Nathan nodded, impressed by his daughter's tactical thinking. There's a small fishing village about 15 miles south. We can find secure communications there. As they put distance between themselves and the island, Evelyn finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Nathan, what really happened 15 years ago? All of it this time. Nathan kept his eyes on their course, but his voice softened. I was investigating budget discrepancies in the Naval Intelligence Division. Funds allocated for sonar research were being diverted, but the paper trail was expertly hidden. When I got too close, I was grabbed during what was supposed to be a routine training exercise. The boat cut smoothly through the misty waters as Nathan continued his story. They held me for 3 weeks, isolated interrogation, trying to determine how much I knew and who I'd told. When they were convinced I was working alone, they staged my rescue from supposed enemy combatants. But why go through all that? Rebecca asked. Why not just... She couldn't finish the thought. Kill me? Nathan supplied grimly. I was too high profile. A decorated officer disappearing during a training exercise raises questions. Being captured by enemies and then rescued made me a hero, directed attention outward rather than within, our own ranks. Plus, they needed to keep me under observation, make sure I didn't start investigating again. So you pretended to comply? Evelyn said softly. Nathan nodded. For your safety. I played the traumatized returned prisoner. Followed their script, but I never stopped watching, gathering evidence, building my case. When Rebecca joined Naval Intelligence, I was terrified she'd stumble onto the same information. That's why you tried to discourage me from the cryptography division, Rebecca realized. You wanted me as far away from Weber as possible. When you were assigned to the Pentagon anyway, I knew it was only a matter of time. I had to accelerate my timeline. Evelyn placed her hand over his on the steering control. And this time, why the elaborate fake death again? Nathan's expression darkened. Weber discovered I was meeting with Admiral Harrington. He set up an accident during a training dive. But I'd anticipated it. Swapped breathing equipment, escaped underwater. They thought I was dead, which gave me the freedom to gather the final evidence. And Max? Rebecca asked, rubbing the now dry German shepherd's head affectionately. How does he fit into all this? For the first time, Nathan smiled genuinely. Max was my insurance policy. Military working dogs are trained to detect anomalies, to alert to things that seem wrong. I specifically trained him to recognize when something was off about my death, the empty coffin, the smell of the men involved in the conspiracy. He was programmed to protect you both and lead you to the evidence if anything happened to me. Evelyn shook her head in amazement. You trusted our lives to a dog's training, to the most intelligent and loyal animal I've ever known, Nathan corrected. And he performed flawlessly. He reached over to scratch Max's ears. Just as I knew, he would. A distant engine sound made them all tense. Nathan cut their motor, letting the boat drift silently in the mist. Through the haze, they could make out the silhouette of a Coast Guard vessel passing about half a mile to their east. They're searching a grid pattern, Nathan whispered. If we stay silent and maintain course, they should miss us in this visibility. As if understanding the need for silence, Max remained perfectly still, his ears alert, but his body motionless. When the patrol boat had passed, Nathan restarted their engine at the lowest setting. That was too close, Rebecca murmured, checking, her waterproof bag containing the drives. We need to get this data transmitted as soon as possible. The fishing village has limited technology, Nathan acknowledged. But I have a contact there, former Navy communications specialist. He can help us set up a secure transmission. As they continued their cautious journey, Evelyn studied her husband's face in the misty morning light. The years had carved new lines around his eyes and mouth, and there was a wariness in his expression that hadn't been there before his first death. But underneath it all, she could still see the man she had married, determined, principled, and fiercely protective of those he loved. "You should have trusted me," she said softly, "from the beginning." Nathan met her gaze, regret evident in his eyes. "You're right. That was my greatest mistake. I thought I was protecting you, but really, I was underestimating you. Both of you," he added, glancing at Rebecca. Max suddenly perked up, his nose testing the air. He moved to the bow of the boat, staring intently through the mist. "What is it, boy?" Nathan asked, reducing their speed even further. The dog gave a soft woof, not his warning bark, but a sound of recognition. Through the thinning mist ahead, a small fishing boat came into view. Standing at its helm was Thomas Blackwood, waving them forward. "Thomas?" Nathan called in disbelief, immediately wary. "How did you get here so quickly?" "Emergency extraction protocol," Thomas replied as their boats drew alongside each other. "Admiral Harrington was shot. We had to separate." Nathan's face paled. "James is hit? How bad?" "Shoulder wound. He's conscious, but he needs medical attention. He ordered me to find you while he led the search team on a false trail." Thomas gestured to his vessel. "This boat has better range and communications. We need to transfer now." Max's stance remained relaxed, his tail giving a slight wag of recognition, which reassured Nathan. The German Shepherd had been specifically trained to alert to deception, particularly from those close to the family. Nathan guided their inflatable alongside Thomas's larger fishing boat. As they secured the vessels together, Rebecca transferred her equipment, while Evelyn helped Max make the jump between crafts. "What happened to the rendezvous plan?" Nathan asked as he boarded, still cautious despite Max's apparent comfort with the situation. "Weber called in naval air support," Thomas explained, already moving back to the helm. "Helicopter will be doing sweeps within the hour. We need to be well away by then." As Thomas steered them southward at increased speed, Nathan examined the boat's communications array. It was indeed more sophisticated than what would be found on a standard fishing vessel, with encrypted satellite capabilities. "This was your contingency boat?" Evelyn asked, noting the well-stocked medical supplies and emergency provisions. "One of 3, Nathan confirmed. "Thomas and I established several fallback positions over the years." Rebecca had already connected her laptop to the boat's power supply and was preparing the evidence files for transmission. "I've sorted the most incriminating files into packages, ready to send to different recipients simultaneously. Media, select senators, and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit." "Good thinking," Nathan approved. "They can't stop all those channels at once." Thomas checked their radar. "We're clear for now, but we should assume they've alerted all Coast Guard vessels in the area." Nathan moved to the communication station. "I'll establish a secure connection to—" "Wait," Evelyn interrupted, something in her expression suddenly alert. "Thomas, where exactly was the Admiral shot?" Thomas didn't look up from the navigation controls. "Left shoulder, through and through." Evelyn's hand moved subtly toward her weapon. "Nathan, when was the last time you and Thomas went fishing at the island?" A flicker of understanding crossed Nathan's face. "Must have been last summer. That big storm came through, remember? The one that almost sank us." Thomas's posture shifted slightly. "Right, that was a close call." Max's demeanor changed instantly. A low growl built in his throat as he fixed his gaze on Thomas, hackles rising. "There was no fishing trip last summer," Nathan said quietly, his hand now resting on his sidearm. "I was deployed to the Mediterranean for 6 months." Thomas's face hardened as he slowly turned from the controls. "Smart, very smart. But it doesn't matter now." Max's growl deepened as Rebecca carefully moved closer to her mother, positioning herself protectively. "How long have you been working with Weber?" Nathan asked, his voice calm, despite the betrayal unfolding before him. From the beginning, Thomas replied with a cold smile. Who do you think alerted him when you first started asking questions? 15 years ago? Who do you think has been feeding him information about your investigation all these years? Evelyn's expression reflected her shock. But you've been our friend for decades. You were there for us when Nathan was captured. The perfect position, Thomas acknowledged. Close enough to monitor everything, trusted enough to never be suspected. He glanced at the German Shepherd. Though I never counted on the dog being quite so perceptive, Nathan's mind raced, reassessing everything. And Admiral Harrington, currently in Weber's custody, I imagine. Unlike me, his loyalty to you was genuine. Thomas's hand moved toward a concealed compartment beside the helm. I truly am sorry it's come to this, Nathan. We've been friends a long time. Don't, Nathan warned, drawing his weapon. You won't shoot me, Thomas said confidently. You need me to pilot this boat, and you know it. From the stern of the boat, Rebecca spoke up. Actually, we don't. She held up a small device. While you were busy explaining your betrayal, I accessed the boat's navigation system. It's already transmitting our location to the FBI field office in Boston with an emergency distress call. Thomas lunged for the hidden compartment, but Max was faster. The German Shepherd launched himself across the deck, a blur of focused power, taking Thomas down with trained precision. Nathan moved swiftly, securing Thomas's weapon and restraining him. The evidence is already transmitting, Rebecca continued, her laptop screen showing multiple progress bars. Redundant channels, just like you taught me, Dad. Even if Weber somehow intercepts one transmission, he can't stop them all. Thomas struggled against his restraints. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Weber's network extends throughout naval intelligence. People you've trusted for years are on his payroll. We know exactly who's involved, Nathan countered, securing Thomas to a fixed chair. Every name, every transaction, every operation for the past 15 years. It's all documented, time-stamped, and now being delivered to multiple agencies simultaneously. Evelyn took control of the boat's helm, adjusting their course slightly. We're 20 minutes from the mainland. The FBI will have agents waiting at the harbor. Max maintained his guard position, watching Thomas with unwavering attention. The German Shepherd's training as a military working dog was fully evident now. He understood that Thomas was a threat and needed to be contained. Weber's still free, Thomas reminded them, and he knows you have the evidence. You think he'll just wait to be arrested? He's already implementing contingency plans. Nathan checked the satellite communication system. Rebecca, can you patch into naval communications? We need to locate Admiral Harrington. Rebecca moved to the comms station, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm scanning emergency channels. If he managed to escape, he might attempt to signal for extraction. Evelyn kept her eyes on the horizon, where the coastline was gradually becoming visible through the diminishing mist. Nathan, what's Weber's most likely move now? Nathan considered the question, drawing on his decades of experience and his intimate knowledge of his adversary. He'll try to reach his escape vehicle, probably the submarine pen at Cold Harbor. Naval station, it's small, under-monitored, perfect for a quiet extraction. He has a submarine? Rebecca asked incredulously. A mini-sub, Nathan clarified, designed for covert insertion and extraction of special forces. Officially decommissioned 3 years ago, but actually repurposed for Weber's private use. Rebecca's laptop emitted a series of beeps as the file transfers completed. Transmissions successful. All packages delivered. She turned to another monitor. I've got something on emergency band 3, weak signal, but it's using Admiral Harrington's authentication code. Nathan moved to her side, adjusting the frequency slightly. James, do you copy? Static crackled. Then Harrington's voice came through, strained but coherent. Nathan, escaped custody. Weber, heading to Cold Harbor. Phase 2 accelerated. What does that mean? Evelyn asked, alarmed. Neptune's Echo demonstration, Nathan explained grimly. They're moving up the timeline. Instead of waiting for next week's scheduled naval exercises, they're going to target an active carrier group. His expression darkened with realization. The Roosevelt Battle Group is conducting operations off the coast today. If they disable their sonar systems without warning, it could cause collisions, navigation failures. Rebecca understood immediately. People would die. And in the chaos, Weber escapes with proof that his technology works exactly as promised, Nathan finished. The perfect sales demonstration to his highest bidders. Thomas laughed coldly from his restrained position. You can't stop it. The activation sequence is already programmed. Even if you arrest Weber, Neptune's Echo will activate, Max growled at Thomas, sensing the rising tension in the boat. James, Nathan spoke into the comm system. What's your position? Maintenance shed. East side of Cold Harbor. Not mobile. Lost some blood. Harrington's voice was weaker now. 15 minutes, Nathan. That's when the system activates. Rebecca was already pulling up satellite imagery of Cold Harbor Naval Station on her laptop. It's a small facility, primarily used for coastal patrol vessels. Minimal security compared to major bases. I know where the control center is, Nathan said, studying the satellite view. Weber converted an old torpedo testing facility into Neptune's Echo's command center. It's isolated, restricted access. Evelyn checked their position against the coastline. We're still 20 minutes from shore at top speed. We won't make it in time to stop the activation. Nathan's military mind worked through options rapidly. We don't need to be there physically. Rebecca, can you hack into their system remotely? Rebecca shook her head. Not without direct access codes. It's almost certainly air-gapped from external networks. There's another way, Thomas spoke up unexpectedly. All eyes turned to him. I'm not dying for Weber's operation, not now that it's exposed. Why would we trust anything you say? Evelyn asked coldly. Because despite everything, I don't want American sailors to die, Thomas replied. There's a backdoor code, a failsafe Weber insisted on in case something went wrong during the demonstration. So Nathan studied his former friend's face, looking for signs of deception. And you know this code? I'm the one who programmed it, Thomas admitted. It's a simple kill switch. 3 sequences entered in the right order through any connected terminal. Rebecca looked up from her computer. The Coast Guard vessels would have compatible communications systems. If I can patch into their network, it could work, Nathan acknowledged cautiously. But we'd need to get close enough to a Coast Guard frequency without being detected. Evelyn adjusted their course again. There's a patrol boat approximately 2 miles southwest of us, according to radar. We could intercept their signal without necessarily revealing our position. Nathan turned back to Thomas. If you're lying about this. I'm not, Thomas insisted. Weber may be willing to sacrifice American lives for profit, but that was never my line. I helped him sell technology, not commit murder. Max had settled somewhat, though he remained vigilant, his intelligent eyes moving between the humans as if following their conversation. Rebecca, prepared to intercept that Coast Guard frequency, Nathan decided. Thomas will provide the kill switch code under my supervision. Evelyn, keep us on course, but maintain enough distance that we don't trigger their proximity alerts. As they worked to implement this plan, positioning their vessel at the optimum distance from the Coast Guard patrol, Rebecca prepared her equipment for the delicate hack. Dad, she said quietly while configuring her system, even if this works, it only stops today's demonstration. It doesn't solve the bigger problem. Nathan nodded grimly. One crisis at a time. The evidence you've transmitted should be reaching the right people by now. Our job is to prevent immediate loss of life. Patrol boat in range, Evelyn announced from the helm, holding position just outside their standard scanning perimeter. Rebecca activated her system, carefully infiltrating the Coast Guard's communications network without triggering security protocols. I'm in their system. It's linked to the Naval Command Net. Now we need the Neptune's Echo control channel, Nathan said, turning to Thomas. Access frequency? Thomas recited a string of numbers and authentication codes. That will get you into the peripheral systems, but not the activation sequence itself. Rebecca's fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through layers of security. I've located the Neptune's Echo subsystem. It's counting down 12 minutes to activation. The kill switch, Nathan prompted Thomas. Now! Thomas recited 3 complex alphanumeric sequences. They must be entered simultaneously into 3 different subsystem terminals. It's designed that way specifically to prevent easy deactivation. Rebecca frowned. I can't input to multiple terminals from this single access point. Yes, you can, Nathan said, moving to her side. The subsystems are networked for monitoring purposes. If you can access the debug console, working together, father and daughter navigated the complex system architecture, Nathan drawing on his years of covert investigation into the project, Rebecca applying her cryptography expertise to bypass security measures. 8 minutes, Evelyn warned, keeping watch on both their position relative to the Coast Guard and the countdown Rebecca had displayed. Max suddenly stood, moving to the boat's edge and staring intently toward the horizon. A moment later, the distant sound of helicopter rotors became audible. Search pattern. Nathan identified the sound immediately. They're sweeping the coastline for us. 6 minutes, Rebecca reported, still working feverishly. I've accessed 2 subsystems, but the third is blocked. Someone's actively defending it. Weber, Nathan realized. He's at the control center, monitoring the system. Then he knows. We're trying to stop it, Evelyn said. The helicopter sound grew louder. Max remained at attention, tracking its approach. Coast Guard vessel is changing course, Evelyn warned. They've spotted us on radar. 5 minutes, Rebecca said tensely. I need more time to break through this firewall. Nathan made a swift decision. Keep working. I'll handle the Coast Guard. He moved to the communication system, setting it to an official emergency channel. Coast Guard vessel, this is Captain Nathan Reed, Naval Intelligence. Authentication code, Sierra Tango 749. We are conducting a classified counterintelligence operation. Request immediate assistance and secure channel. There was a moment of silence before a response came through. Captain Reed, this is Coast Guard Cutter Resolute. You're listed as deceased in our database. That's part of the operation, Nathan replied without hesitation. Contact Admiral Curtis at Naval Command for confirmation. Authorization Neptune Prime. A longer pause followed. Rebecca continued her work, now down to 3 minutes on the countdown. I've almost got it, she murmured. Just one more layer, the Coast Guard responded. Captain Reed, we've received verification from Naval Command. How can we assist? Nathan exhaled in relief. We need your communications array to prevent a catastrophic system failure aboard the Roosevelt carrier group. Patch us through directly to your secure terminal. 2 minutes, Rebecca warned. I'm still locked out of the 3rd subsystem. Captain, Evelyn said suddenly, pointing to a rapidly approaching vessel. We have company. Navy interceptor coming. In vast. The sleek patrol boat was racing toward them, clearly not responding to Nathan's authorization codes. On its deck, they could make out armed personnel taking position. Weber's private security. Nathan identified them. Not regular Navy. 30 seconds, Rebecca called out. I've bypassed the 2nd firewall, but I can't crack the final encryption. In that critical moment, Max suddenly barked once sharply. His eyes were fixed not on the approaching threat, but on Thomas. It's not 3 separate codes, Thomas said, his expression changing. It's one code, entered from 3 access points simultaneously. The system is looking for synchronized input. Are you saying, Nathan began. I'm saying I lied, Thomas admitted, but not about wanting to stop this. The real kill switch is a single command, Avalanche 7 Epsilon 4 Tango. Rebecca immediately entered the command, broadcasting it simultaneously to all 3 subsystems. The countdown froze at 12 seconds. It worked, she breathed. System deactivated. Nathan stared at Thomas, trying to understand his former friend's actions. Why tell us now? Because some lines shouldn't be crossed, Thomas replied quietly. Selling technology is one thing, mass casualties is another. Even Weber doesn't know I built in that override. The approaching interceptor was now close enough that they could see Weber himself on the deck, his face contorted with fury as he realized his demonstration had been thwarted. Coast Guard Cutter Resolute, Nathan spoke into the comm system. Be advised, the approaching Navy interceptor is carrying Captain Lawrence Weber, wanted for treason and conspiracy. Request immediate interception and detention. Roger that, Captain Reed. We have him on radar, moving to intercept. As the much larger Coast Guard vessel changed course to cut off Weber's boat, Max finally relaxed, sitting down beside Rebecca with what almost looked like a satisfied expression. It's over, Evelyn said softly, watching the Coast Guard cutter position itself between their boat and Weber's interceptor. Not quite, Nathan replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. We still need to retrieve Admiral Harrington from Cold Harbor and make sure all the evidence reaches the right people. Rebecca closed her laptop, the immediate crisis averted. And after that? Nathan looked at his wife and daughter, then down at Max, who had served his purpose with unwavering loyalty. After 15 years of secrets, deception, and separation, they were finally together, the truth exposed at last. After that, he said, with a smile that reached his eyes for the first time in 15 years, we go home. The Coast Guard cutter Resolute escorted their boat safely to shore, where a contingent of FBI agents waited on the dock. Weber's interceptor had been forcibly detained, its captain and crew now in custody. As they approached the harbor, Nathan spotted a familiar figure standing among the federal agents. Commander Sophia Harrington, Admiral Harrington's daughter, her naval uniform crisp despite her evident concern. They've already dispatched a team to Cold Harbor to retrieve the Admiral, Rebecca reported, having maintained communication with the authorities throughout their approach. Thomas sat silently as FBI agents boarded their vessel, accepting his arrest without resistance. As they led him away, he paused beside Nathan. For whatever it's worth, I did consider you a friend, he said quietly. That part wasn't a lie. Nathan watched his former friend being escorted into a waiting vehicle. That's what makes it worse, he replied. Max stayed close to Evelyn and Rebecca as they disembarked, the German shepherd's mission still not complete in his mind. His training had been specific: protect the family until they were safely reunited and the threat eliminated. From his perspective, they remained in potential danger until Weber was fully contained. Commander Harrington approached them, saluting Nathan crisply before her professional demeanor cracked slightly. Captain Reed, it's disconcerting to see you alive, sir. Understandable, Commander, Nathan replied with a slight smile. How's your father? Stable. Medics reached him at Cold Harbor. He's being transported to Naval Medical Center for surgery. She handed Nathan a secure tablet. He asked me to give you this, said you'd know what to do with it. The tablet contained Admiral Harrington's personal authentication codes and access to his secure communications network, essentially giving Nathan the authority to act with the Admiral's full backing within Naval Command. The evidence packages you distributed have created quite a stir, Commander Harrington continued. 3 senators have already called emergency committee meetings, and the FBI has teams moving on identified members of Weber's network. How many have they apprehended so far? Rebecca asked. 17 naval officers, 4 defense contractors, and 2 foreign operatives posing as diplomatic staff, the commander reported. But there are still gaps in the network. Nathan nodded. Grimly, Webber was careful. Some connections were maintained solely through intermediaries, people who might not even know they were part of his operation. An FBI agent approached, introducing herself as Special Agent Diane Mercer. Captain Reed, we need to debrief you and your family immediately. We're also going to need statements regarding Thomas Blackwood's involvement. Of course, Nathan agreed. But first, I need to access a secure terminal. There's one more piece of Neptune's Echo that needs to be neutralized. Agent Mercer led them to a mobile command center that had been established in a nearby Coast Guard facility. Inside, technicians monitored communications while analysts processed incoming intelligence related to Webber's operation. Nathan immediately moved to a secure terminal using Admiral Harrington's access codes to penetrate the deepest levels of naval intelligence systems. What are you looking for? Evelyn asked, watching over his shoulder. Neptune's Echo isn't just a weapons system, Nathan explained, as he navigated through classified databases. It's also an intelligence-gathering network. Webber didn't just sell the technology itself, he sold the data it collected. Rebecca joined them, immediately understanding the implications. Sonar data from American submarines and surface vessels. Exactly, Nathan confirmed, which means there's a massive database somewhere containing years of classified naval movements and capabilities. His fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard, searching through hidden directories and restricted access points that he'd discovered during his years of covert investigation. There, he said finally, bringing up a heavily encrypted file structure. This is it, the complete Neptune's Echo archive. Max had settled near the door, maintaining his vigilant watch over the family. Occasionally, his ears would perk up at unfamiliar sounds, but he remained calm, sensing no immediate threats. Can you destroy it? Agent Mercer asked, now understanding the significance of what they'd uncovered. Not directly, Nathan replied. It's too well protected with multiple redundancies and off-site backups, but I can compromise it. He began implementing a complex series of commands, a virus that will corrupt the data structure while appearing to leave everything intact. Anyone accessing this in the future will retrieve garbage data without realizing. It's been compromised. As Nathan worked, Evelyn found herself studying her husband's face, the focused intensity, the methodical precision. These were aspects of Nathan she'd always known. But watching him navigate through these highly classified systems revealed the double life he'd been leading for 15 years and the toll it had taken. How long will this take? Commander Harrington asked, checking her watch. We have orders to escort you to a secure facility within the hour. Almost done, Nathan murmured, implementing the final sequences of his digital sabotage. There, it's corrupting now, slowly enough to avoid triggering security protocols. Within 48 hours, the entire archive will be useless. Rebecca had been monitoring communications on another terminal. Dad, they've apprehended Webber. He was trying to reach a secondary extraction point on the north side of the harbor. A collective sense of relief passed through the room. The immediate threat had been contained. Captain Reed, Agent Mercer said formally, I need to inform you that you and your family will be placed under protective custody pending full debriefing and possible testimony before several congressional committees. Nathan nodded, having expected this. How long? Undetermined at this point. The scope of this conspiracy. She gestured to the screens displaying the growing web of Webber's network. This is unprecedented. Evelyn stepped forward. We understand the necessity, Agent Mercer, but we have one request. Ma'am? Max stays with us, she said firmly, resting her hand on the German shepherd's head. He's not just a dog, he's a trained military asset and a key part of this operation. Agent Mercer observed the dog's disciplined demeanor and nodded. That one can be arranged. He's technically evidence anyway. As they prepared to depart for the secure facility, Nathan took a moment alone with Evelyn near the window overlooking the harbor. "I know this isn't the reunion you imagined," he said softly. "More security, more debriefings." Evelyn took his hand, intertwining their fingers. 15 years ago, I thought I'd lost you forever. Then I grieved you a second time last week. Having you back, really back, is all that matters. The rest is just details." Nathan's eyes softened. "I've missed so much. Rebecca's graduation, your father's passing, all those years we can never get back." "Then we don't waste any more time," Evelyn replied simply. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. No more secrets." Rebecca joined them, Max following faithfully, at her heels. "They're ready for us," she reported. "2 separate vehicles. They want you and Mom in the first one, me and Max in the second." "No," Nathan said immediately. "We stay together, all of us." Agent Mercer started to object, but fell silent when she saw the determination in Nathan's expression. 15 years, he said quietly. 15 years of separation. We traveled together, or not at all. The agent considered this, then nodded. "One vehicle then, but we leave now." As they exited the building, a convoy of black SUVs waited in the parking area. Media vans had already begun to gather at the perimeter, news of Weber's arrest and the uncovering of a major naval intelligence conspiracy having leaked to the press. Max tensed slightly at the commotion, positioning himself protectively beside Evelyn. Nathan rested his hand reassuringly on the dog's back. "It's all right, boy," he murmured. "They're just doing their job." They were quickly ushered into the lead vehicle, agents forming a protective barrier against the shouted questions and camera flashes. Once inside, the convoy pulled away from the Coast Guard station, beginning the journey to what would be their home for the foreseeable future. "Where are they taking us?" Rebecca asked, watching the coastal town recede through the tinted windows. "A safe house in western Massachusetts," Agent Mercer replied from the front passenger seat. "Remote, secure, and comfortable enough for an extended stay." Nathan felt Max shift against his leg, the German shepherd settling into a vigilant but relaxed posture now that they were moving away from the crowds. The dog's training had prepared him for high-stress situations, but even Max had his limits. The past week had been as demanding for him as it had been for the humans he protected. "He needs rest," Nathan observed, noticing the subtle signs of fatigue in Max's otherwise alert demeanor, "and proper food. He's been operating on training rations for days." "The safe house is fully stocked," Mercer assured them, "including high-grade canine provisions. We anticipated his needs." As they traveled inland, the coastal fog gave way to clear skies. The SUV wound through increasingly rural landscapes, small towns giving way to forests and scattered farmhouses. The secure convoy maintained a steady pace, putting distance between them and the coastal facilities where Weber's operation had been centered. "There's something I don't understand," Rebecca said after a long silence. "If Thomas was working with Weber from the beginning, why did he help us at the end? He could have let Neptune's Echo activate." Nathan considered this, recalling his decades-long friendship with the man who had betrayed him. Thomas was always motivated by profit, not ideology. Selling technology to the highest bidder was business to him. Mass casualties would have crossed, a line he wasn't willing to step over. "Honor among thieves?" Evelyn questioned skeptically. "More like self-preservation," Nathan replied. Thomas knew that once the evidence was out, Weber's entire network would fall. By helping prevent the worst outcomes, he positions himself for potential leniency. Max suddenly raised his head, ears forward, focusing on something ahead. The convoy had begun to slow as they approached a checkpoint where state police had established a security perimeter. "Standard procedure," Agent Mercer explained, noting their concern. "We're establishing a clean corridor all the way to the safe house," As they passed through the checkpoint, Max relaxed again, seeming to understand they were moving deeper into secure territory rather than facing a new threat. "How long will the debriefings take?" Evelyn asked. "Weeks, at minimum," Mercer replied. "Honestly, Captain Reed's testimony alone will likely span days, given the duration and complexity of Weber's operation." Nathan looked at his wife and daughter, then down at Max. After 15 years of secretive investigation and careful documentation, the thought of finally being able to tell the whole truth, openly and completely, felt strangely liberating. "I have a request," he said to Agent Mercer. "Once we're settled, I'd like to arrange for Admiral Harrington to join us when he's medically cleared. His perspective will be crucial to building a complete picture." "Already in progress," Mercer confirmed. The Admiral made the same request from his hospital bed. The convoy turned onto a private road, winding through dense forest toward what appeared to be a large, modern lodge nestled against the backdrop of a mountain range. Security measures were visible but discreet. Motion sensors, cameras concealed. In the landscaping, reinforced barriers that looked like decorative fencing. As they pulled up to the main entrance, Nathan felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For 15 years, he'd lived in the shadows, gathering evidence, building his case piece by piece, all while knowing he couldn't contact the people he loved most. Now, despite the ongoing investigation and protective custody, he was finally stepping back into the light, with his family beside him. Max was the first out of the vehicle when the door opened, performing a quick perimeter check before determining the area was secure. His training was impressive to watch, methodical, thorough, instinctive. "He's extraordinary," Agent Mercer commented, observing the German Shepherd's disciplined behavior. "He saved our lives," Rebecca said simply, following the dog up the steps to the lodge entrance. Inside, the safe house was spacious and well-appointed, designed for extended stays with comfortable furnishings and modern amenities. Security personnel maintained a discreet presence, allowing the family a sense of privacy while ensuring their protection. "You'll be briefed on protocols in the morning," Mercer informed them. "For now, get some rest. It's been a long day." As the agents withdrew to their designated areas, leaving the family alone in the main living space, Max finally seemed to understand that his primary mission was complete. The German Shepherd circled the room once, checking each window and doorway, before returning to where Nathan, Evelyn, and Rebecca stood together. With a soft whine, he lay down at their feet, his vigilant posture relaxing for the first time in a days. "I think he knows we're safe," Rebecca observed, kneeling to ruffle the dog's fur affectionately. "He's earned his rest," Nathan agreed, looking down at the faithful animal who had played such a crucial role in bringing his family back together. Evelyn moved to the large windows overlooking the forested valley below. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "Peaceful." Nathan joined her, placing his arm around her shoulders. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the day's light fade. "What happens after all this?" Rebecca asked, joining her parents at the window. "After the testimony and investigations, do we just go back to normal?" Nathan considered the question. After 15 years of living a double life, the concept of normal seemed foreign, almost unimaginable. "I don't think we can go back," he said honestly. "Too much has changed, but we can go forward, together this time." Max had risen to join them, standing alertly beside Rebecca as if to emphasize Nathan's point about moving forward as a complete unit. "Together," Evelyn agreed, reaching down to stroke Max's head. "All of us." As darkness fell over the mountains, the Reed family remained by the window, united at last after 15 years of separation and secrets. The road ahead would be challenging, testimonies to give, a conspiracy to unravel, a new life to build. But for the first time in over a decade, they would face it as a family. And Max, the German shepherd, whose loyalty and training had brought them together, remained at their side, his mission transformed, but not ended. He was no longer just a military working dog, or even merely a faithful pet. He had become the living symbol of the bond that had survived 15 years of absence, the persistent truth that had refused to stay buried in an empty coffin. 3 weeks into their protective custody, the safe house had developed its own rhythm. Mornings began with debriefings. Nathan in the secure communications room with various intelligence officials and investigators, Rebecca working with cybersecurity experts to trace the full extent of the Neptune's Echo network, and Evelyn coordinating with the prosecution team, building the case against Weber and his conspirators. Afternoons were reserved for family time, a precious commodity they all guarded zealously after 15 years of separation. Max had adapted perfectly to their new circumstances. The German shepherd maintained his protective instincts while relaxing enough to enjoy the expansive grounds surrounding the safe house. Each morning, he accompanied Nathan on a perimeter. Check that doubled as exercise for both of them. And each evening, he settled contentedly in the living room as the family reconnected over dinner, board games, or simply conversation. On this particular morning, Nathan sat in the communications room, facing a panel of naval intelligence officials on the secure video link. The exhaustive debriefings had become more focused as the investigation progressed, today's session concentrating on the origins of Weber's conspiracy. To properly understand how this began, Nathan explained, we need to go back to the naval budget reforms of 2000. That's when Weber first identified vulnerabilities in how classified research was funded and tracked. A stern-faced admiral on the screen nodded. We've recovered documentation suggesting initial technology diversions began as early as 2002. That aligns with my findings, Nathan confirmed. Small scale at first, components rather than complete systems, technical specifications rather than functioning prototypes. Weber was testing the waters, seeing what he could extract without detection. As the debriefing continued, Nathan provided detailed timelines, connecting incidents that had previously seemed unrelated into a comprehensive pattern of deception and exploitation. His meticulous documentation over 15 years now served as the backbone of what had become the largest counterintelligence operation in naval history. In another room, Rebecca worked alongside FBI cybersecurity specialists, her expertise in cryptography proving invaluable as they disassembled the digital architecture of Neptune's Echo. The genius of the system was its modular design, she explained, highlighting components on her screen. Each piece could function independently, so buyers could purchase just the capabilities they needed without realizing they were receiving fragments of a larger system. Like a jigsaw puzzle where no one realizes they're only getting pieces, observed Special Agent Carter, the lead technical investigator. Exactly. And only Weber knew what the completed picture looked like. Rebecca pulled up a series of transaction records. See these patterns? Different buyers, similar components, always with slight variations. He was ensuring no single client could reconstruct the full technology without his involvement. In the kitchen, Evelyn sat with Agent Mercer and a Justice Department prosecutor, reviewing witness testimonies and evidence chains. Her analytical skills, honed during her years as a naval intelligence analyst and then as a single mother managing a household while constantly vigilant, made her an unexpectedly valuable asset to the investigation team. Thomas Blackwood's testimony contradicts Commander Phillips on key points, she noted, comparing statements, particularly regarding the 2018 technology transfer to these shell companies in Singapore. You think he's still concealing information? The prosecutor asked. Not concealing, Evelyn clarified. shaping the narrative to minimize his role. Thomas always understood the power of controlling information flow. Even now, he's trying to position himself as a reluctant participant rather than an architect. Max, lying at Evelyn's feet, raised his head suddenly, ears perked toward the front entrance, moments before anyone heard the approaching vehicles. The German Shepherd's acute senses had become a running joke among the security team. No one entered the perimeter without Max knowing it first. That would be Admiral Harrington, Agent Mercer confirmed, checking her phone. His convoy just cleared the main gate. Max trotted to the window, watching as a small motorcade approached the house. Though the dog recognized most of the security personnel by now, he maintained his vigilant assessment of everyone who entered their space. Admiral Harrington's arrival marked a significant development in the investigation. After 3 weeks of recovery from his gunshot wound, he had been cleared to join the Reed family at the safe house, bringing with him critical insights into Weber's operation from his parallel investigation. Nathan met his old friend at the door, noting the sling supporting his left arm and the tired lines around his eyes. Despite these signs of strain, the Admiral's firm handshake and clear gaze suggested his resilience remained intact. "James?" Nathan greeted him warmly. "Good to see you vertical. Better than the alternative," Harrington replied with a slight smile. "The doctors tell me I'm lucky. Clean through and through, no major damage." Max approached the Admiral cautiously, sniffing his hand before giving a soft woof of recognition and allowing Harrington to pat his head. "He remembers you from the island," Nathan observed. "Smart dog," Harrington commented. "Saved all our lives from what I hear." They moved to the main living area where Evelyn and Rebecca joined them, along with the core investigation team. The mood shifted from personal to professional as they gathered around the large table that had become their strategic center. "We've made significant progress mapping Weber's network," Agent Mercer began, activating the display screen on the wall. 43 arrests so far, spanning 7 countries. Financial assets exceeding $2 billion frozen. "But we're still missing pieces," Nathan added, studying the organizational chart displayed before them. "Particularly regarding Weber's initial financing. Someone backed his operation before it became self-sustaining through technology sales." "Admiral," Harrington's expression darkened, "that's what I've been focusing on during my recovery." He placed a secure drive on the table. "My daughter managed to extract these files from a private server at Naval Intelligence Headquarters. They suggest Weber had high-level political protection." The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Rebecca connected the drive to their secure system, displaying its contents on the main screen. Financial transactions, classified, communications, and meeting records scrolled before them, each file more damning than the last. Senator Malcolm Hayes. Evelyn identified the name that appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. Chair of the Senate Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, and godfather to Weber's daughter, Harrington confirmed grimly. Their connection goes back decades. Nathan studied the evidence, his mind racing through implications and connections. This explains how Weber maintained his operation even when questions were raised internally. Hayes could quash investigations, redirect oversight, ensure funding. Continued without scrutiny. "We need to proceed carefully," the Justice Department prosecutor cautioned. "Accusing a sitting senator of this magnitude of corruption requires irrefutable evidence," Nathan finished, "which is exactly what we have." He pointed to specific transactions highlighted in the files. "These aren't just suspicious coincidences. They're direct payments through established channels, documented over 15 years. Max had settled beside Rebecca, his alertness never fully diminishing even in this secure environment. The German Shepherd seemed to sense the tension in the room, his intelligent eyes moving between speakers as if following the complex human conversation. "There's something else," Admiral Harrington said after a moment. "Something I discovered just before Weber's people caught up with me at Cold Harbor." He pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket. Hayes wasn't just protecting Weber for financial gain. He was actively participating in technology transfers to foreign entities. The implications were staggering. A United States senator directly involved in selling classified military technology to foreign powers. The room buzzed with urgent discussions as the investigation team assessed this new information, strategizing how to proceed with such politically sensitive evidence. As the day progressed into evening, the formal briefings gave way to a more personal gathering. The investigation team departed, leaving the Reed family alone with Admiral Harrington. They moved to the comfortable living area where Evelyn had prepared dinner, a welcome respite from the institutional meals that had become their norm. "Almost feels normal," Rebecca commented, helping her mother set the table while Nathan and Harrington continued their conversation by the fireplace. Max patrolled the perimeter once more before settling near the hearth, his protective instincts never fully at rest. "I'm not sure I remember what normal feels like," Evelyn admitted with a small smile. "But this is nice, having your father here, having you both safe." Rebecca paused, watching her parents interact with a naturalness that belied their 15-year separation. "How are you and Dad really doing?" she asked quietly. "With everything?" Evelyn considered the question carefully. "We're finding our way back to each other. Some things are different. We've both changed over the years, but the foundation is still there." As they gathered for dinner, the conversation deliberately shifted away from the investigation to more personal matters. Admiral Harrington shared stories of his daughter's recent promotion. Nathan spoke of his plans once their protective custody ended, and Rebecca tentatively mentioned her interest in transitioning from naval intelligence to a cybersecurity role that would keep her closer to home. "I've spent enough time in classified operations," she explained. "I'd rather use my skills somewhere I can actually talk about my day when I come home at night." Nathan nodded understanding. After 15 years of secrecy, transparency sounds appealing. As the evening progressed, Max suddenly raised his head, ears alert. The conversation paused as everyone instinctively trusted the German Shepherd's senses. "Perimeter alarm," Agent Mercer confirmed, entering the room with her hand near her sidearm. "Security team is investigating. Probably just wildlife, but as a precaution, I need everyone to move to the secure room." Years of training had the naval officers moving immediately. Nathan guided Evelyn while Harrington assisted with the secured files. Rebecca gathered essential electronics, and Max took up a protective position at the rear of their formation, watching for threats as they moved efficiently through the house to a reinforced safe room designed to withstand virtually any attack. "Status. Report," Agent Mercer demanded into her radio once they were secured inside. "False alarm," came the reply after a tense minute. Perimeter sensors were triggered by a fallen branch from the storm moving in. All clear. The tension in the room eased, though Max remained vigilant by the door. The brief scare served as a reminder that despite their comfortable surroundings, they remained under protection for good reason. Weber's network, while severely damaged, still had operational elements that might seek retribution. "Perhaps this is a good time to discuss next steps," Admiral Harrington suggested as they settled into the secure room's seating area. "The Hayes evidence changes our timeline." Nathan nodded agreement. "We can't maintain protective custody indefinitely, especially once we move against a sitting senator. The Justice Department is preparing for simultaneous operations," Agent Mercer informed them. "Arrests, asset seizures, and public disclosure, all coordinated to prevent evidence destruction or escape attempts." "When?" Evelyn asked directly. 72 hours, Mercer replied, "after which we transition you to a new identity program until the trials conclude." Rebecca looked alarmed. "New identities? For how long?" "Potentially years," Mercer acknowledged. The prosecution of this many high-level conspirators won't be quick or simple. A heavy silence fell over the room as they absorbed this information. After finally reuniting, the Reed family now faced another form of separation from their prior lives, from their home, from everything familiar. "No," Nathan said firmly, after a moment. "That's not acceptable." Agent Mercer frowned. "Captain Reed, this isn't negotiable. The threat assessment is based on incomplete information," Nathan interrupted. "We've spent 3 weeks outlining Weber's entire operation, identifying every key player, freezing their assets, and dismantling their infrastructure. The surviving network is fragmented and defensive, not organized for offensive operations against protected witnesses." "With respect, Captain, you can't know that with certainty," Mercer countered. "Actually, I can." Nathan moved to the secure terminal in the corner of the room. "Rebecca, show her the surveillance analysis you completed last week." Rebecca quickly accessed the system, pulling up a comprehensive assessment of Weber's remaining operational capabilities. "We've been monitoring communications, asset movements, and personnel activities across what remains of his network. They're in complete disarray, focused entirely on protecting themselves from prosecution." Admiral Harrington added his perspective. "Agent Mercer, I understand the protocol, but this situation is unique. The Reed family has lived under a cloud of deception for 15 years. Forcing them into witness protection now, when they've finally reunited, would be unnecessarily punitive." Max had returned to Nathan's side, seeming to sense the importance of the discussion. The German Shepherd's unwavering loyalty through the entire ordeal stood as a silent testament to the value of remaining together. "What do you propose instead?" Mercer asked, clearly reluctant but willing to listen. "Limited protection," Nathan suggested. "Security details during the trial phase, restricted public appearances, but no new identities, no relocation beyond returning to our home in Port Harwick. With appropriate security modifications," Evelyn added pragmatically, "and we maintain Max as part of our household security. His training and instincts have proven invaluable." Agent Mercer considered these points, weighing protocol against the unique circumstances of the Reed family's situation. "I'll need authorization from the director," she finally said, "but I'll present your case." The all-clear signal allowed them to return to the main living area, though the discussion had cast a shadow over the evening. As Admiral Harrington prepared to retire to his assigned quarters, he paused beside Nathan. "You've built something remarkable here, Nathan," he said quietly, gesturing to the family gathered in the living room. "Despite everything Weber took from you, despite 15 years of separation, your family survived. That's worth fighting for." "That's why I can't accept witness protection," Nathan replied with conviction. "I've already lost too much time with them." Later that night, as a storm front moved across the mountains surrounding their safe house, Nathan stood at the large windows watching lightning illuminate the dense forest. Evelyn joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmured. "I was thinking about time," he replied softly. "How strange it is. 15 years felt like an eternity while we were apart. But now that we're together again, it sometimes feels like no time has passed at all. And other times I see how much I've missed," he admitted. "Rebecca is a grown woman now, with a career and life experiences I know nothing about. You've developed strengths and habits formed without me. Even Max has a bond with you that I'm still building." Evelyn turned him to face her. "We have time now, Nathan. Whatever happens with the investigation, with Hayes and Weber, with all of it, we have time to relearn each other, to build new memories." From his place by the fireplace, Max watched them with serene attention, the German Shepherd's calm presence a counterpoint to the storm raging outside. Rebecca entered from the kitchen, carrying mugs of hot chocolate. a family tradition from before Nathan's disappearance that she had maintained in his absence. "Agent Mercer just received word from her director," she announced. "They're considering our proposal for modified protection instead of complete identity change. The director wants a full security assessment of the Port Harwick house before making a final decision." Nathan accepted the mug she offered, feeling a surge of hope. "That's progress. It means we might actually go home," Evelyn added, the significance not lost on any of them. The concept of home had evolved for each of them over the past 15 years. For Nathan, it had become an abstract goal, a place he'd sacrificed his presence in to protect. For Evelyn and Rebecca, it had been both sanctuary and constant reminder of absence. Now, they had the chance to redefine it together. "I've been thinking," Nathan said, setting his mug down and retrieving a folder from his briefcase. "If we do return to Port Harwick, we should consider some renovations." He opened the folder, revealing architectural drawings. "I've been working on these during downtime between debriefings." The plans showed their coastal home, with significant security upgrades subtly integrated into the historical architecture. Reinforced walls, advanced monitoring systems, secure communications, all designed to provide protection without transforming their home into an obvious fortress. "You've included Max's training area," Rebecca noticed, pointing to a section of the backyard designed specifically for the German Shepherd's continued conditioning. "He's earned a permanent place in our family," Nathan said, glancing at the dog, who perked up at hearing his name. "The Navy has officially transferred his service record to civilian status under our care." Max's tail thumped against the floor, almost as if he understood the significance of the moment. The German Shepherd, who had faithfully guarded Nathan's secrets, who had led Evelyn and Rebecca to the truth, and who had protected them throughout the investigation, would continue as their guardian as they built their new life. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rolled across the mountains. Yet inside the safe house, the Reed family had found an unexpected moment of peace amidst the ongoing investigation and uncertain future. Together, they reviewed Nathan's plans for their home, suggesting modifications, envisioning their return to Port Harwick not as frightened witnesses, but as a family determined to reclaim their lives. Admiral Harrington reappeared briefly, drawn by their animated conversation. "Good news about the protection modification?" "Still pending," Nathan replied, "but looking promising." "Excellent." Harrington's expression grew more serious. "I've just received word that Senator Hayes has been placed under discreet surveillance. The evidence was compelling enough for a federal judge to approve monitoring." This development represented another significant step forward, the beginning of accountability for even the highest-placed conspirators in Weber's network. "How soon will they move on him?" Nathan asked. 24 hours, Harrington confirmed. "They want everything in place for simultaneous actions across multiple jurisdictions." As the Admiral departed again, Rebecca turned to her parents. "It's really happening, isn't it? After all these years, everyone involved will finally face justice." Nathan nodded, though his expression remained guarded. "Justice, yes. But we need to be prepared for how difficult the trials will be. Our testimony will be challenged, our credibility attacked. Thomas Blackwood's betrayal gives the defense attorneys an opening to question everything." "We have the evidence," Evelyn reminded him. "Documented, verified, and corroborated from multiple sources." "And we have each other," Rebecca added firmly. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Max rose from his place by the fire and moved to the windows, watching the storm with alert interest. His posture wasn't tense or alarmed, merely attentive, as if standing guard against the chaos of the natural world, just as he had protected them from human threats. Nathan joined the German Shepherd, resting his hand on the dog's strong back. You know, in all my planning and preparation over the years, I never anticipated Max would be the key to bringing us back together. I think that's the one thing Weber never accounted for, Evelyn observed. That an animal's loyalty and instincts could undo 15 years of careful deception. The empty coffin was their mistake, Rebecca added. If they had provided a body, any body, we might never have discovered the truth. Nathan shook his head, smiling slightly as he scratched behind Max's ears. No, they would have had to fool him too, and that's nearly impossible. Military working dogs like Max are trained to detect anomalies, to recognize patterns and inconsistencies that even humans might miss. They couldn't fake my death convincingly enough to fool him. As if confirming this assessment, Max leaned against Nathan's leg, his intelligent eyes moving between the family members he had worked so diligently to reunite and protect. Outside, the storm began to recede, the rhythmic patter of rain softening as the worst of the weather moved eastward. Like the storm, the immediate crisis of Weber's conspiracy was passing, though its effects would continue to ripple through their lives for years to come. Tomorrow would bring more debriefings, more evidence analysis, more preparation for the legal battles ahead. But tonight, in this moment of calm between storms, the Reed family had found something precious. Not just reunion, but the beginning of recovery. The first tentative steps toward rebuilding what 15 years of secrecy and separation had damaged but never destroyed. Max settled back by the fire, his mission evolved but not ended. The German shepherd, who had refused to accept his master's death, who had barked insistently at an empty coffin until someone listened, would remain their guardian through whatever challenges lay ahead. His loyalty had been the catalyst that revealed the truth, and now it would be the foundation upon which they built their future, together at last. 6 months after the discovery of the empty coffin, the Reed family stood on the deck of their renovated Port Harwick home, watching. The autumn leaves spiraled down toward the Atlantic. The security upgrades Nathan had designed had been seamlessly integrated into the historic coastal property. Reinforced walls disguised by traditional clapboard siding, surveillance systems hidden within weathered trim, and bulletproof glass that retained the charm of original window frames. The perimeter sensors are active, Rebecca noted, checking her tablet. Max's training course is finally complete too. The German shepherd perked up at the mention of his name, his intelligent eyes moving to Rebecca expectantly. At Nathan's signal, Max bounded down the steps to inspect his new training area, an elaborate setup that maintained his military skills while looking to casual observers like standard backyard landscaping. He seems to approve, Evelyn observed, smiling as the dog navigated the obstacle course with practiced efficiency. Though I think he'd be happy with anything as long as we're all here. Nathan watched his family with quiet satisfaction. The past 6 months had been challenging, endless testimony, cross-examinations, and the constant media scrutiny that came with exposing the largest conspiracy in naval intelligence history. Weber's trial was ongoing, with prosecutors methodically presenting the mountain of evidence Nathan had gathered over 15 years. Senator Hayes had resigned in disgrace, facing multiple federal charges. Thomas Blackwood had accepted a plea deal in exchange for his cooperation, his testimony helping to dismantle what remained of the Neptune's Echo network. Admiral Harrington called this morning, Nathan mentioned, turning back to the horizon, where the lighthouse stood as a constant sentinel. The final phase of the investigation is complete. 17 more arrests across 3 countries. Does that mean we can finally reduce our security detail? Evelyn asked hopefully. While they had avoided witness protection, their lives still operated under significant restrictions and constant surveillance. Not entirely, Nathan admitted. But we're moving to a lower threat assessment level. The agents stationed in the guest house will be reduced to a single team, and our movement restrictions within Port Harwick have been lifted. Rebecca sipped her coffee, her expression thoughtful. It's strange to think that just 6 months ago, we thought you were dead. Again. She glanced at her father, still occasionally struck by the reality of his presence after so many years of absence, followed by the shock of his second death and miraculous return. I still have nightmares about that empty coffin, Evelyn confessed quietly. About what might have happened if Max hadn't been so persistent. As if understanding he was being discussed, Max completed his inspection of the training course and returned to the deck, settling protectively at Evelyn's feet. His military training remained evident in his alert posture and watchful gaze, though he had gradually relaxed into his role as family guardian rather than operational asset. He knows he's the hero of this story, Rebecca laughed, reaching down to ruffle the German shepherd's fur. Don't you, boy? Max's tail thumped against the deck in what seemed like agreement, drawing smiles from the family. His extraordinary intelligence and training had not only saved Nathan's life, but had reunited a family torn apart by conspiracy and deception. The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention to the private road leading to their property. 2 cars appeared through the tree line, the familiar black SUV used by their security detail, and behind it, a more personal vehicle. That's Admiral Harrington, Nathan identified, recognizing the second car. He wasn't scheduled to visit until next week. Max stood, his posture alert but not alarmed. Over the months, he had become accustomed to the Admiral's regular visits, recognizing him as an ally and friend to the family. As the vehicles parked and their occupants emerged, Nathan noticed immediately that something was different. Admiral Harrington was in full dress uniform rather than his usual civilian attire, and he carried what appeared to be official documentation. "Stay here," Nathan instructed his family, moving down to greet their visitor. Max, however, followed him despite the command, his training compelling him to remain protective whenever unknown situations arose. The security detail performed their standard check before allowing the Admiral to approach. Harrington's expression was unreadable as he met Nathan at the bottom of the deck stairs. "James," Nathan greeted him. "This is unexpected." "Official business, I'm afraid," Harrington replied, though a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth suggested the news might not be unwelcome. "I've just come from a classified meeting at the Pentagon." Evelyn and Rebecca had joined them despite Nathan's instruction to stay on the deck, their curiosity overriding caution. Max positioned himself between the family and the visitor, a habit he maintained even with familiar faces. "What's happened?" Evelyn asked directly, concern evident in her voice. After months of gradual progress toward normalcy, any disruption to their routine raised immediate alarms. Admiral Harrington's formal demeanor finally broke into a genuine smile. "The Secretary of the Navy has reviewed the complete evidence regarding Operation Neptune's Echo and Captain Reed's 15-year covert investigation." He held out the document folder he'd been carrying. "I have here official orders. Effective. Immediately." Nathan accepted the folder with steady hands that belied his internal tension. Opening it carefully, he scanned the contents, his expression shifting from concern to disbelief. "What is it?" Rebecca prompted, unable to contain her curiosity. "My reinstatement to active duty," Nathan explained, still processing the information. "And a promotion to Rear Admiral." "Congratulations, Admiral Reed," Harrington said formally, extending his hand. "There's more," Nathan continued, turning to the second page. "I'm being appointed to head a new division within Naval Intelligence, specifically tasked with internal security and counter-corruption measures." Evelyn moved closer, reading over his shoulder. "Nathan, this is everything you worked for all those years." The significance wasn't lost on any of them. After 15 years operating in the shadows, gathering evidence at great personal cost, Nathan was being publicly vindicated and entrusted with ensuring no conspiracy like Weber's could ever again take root within naval intelligence. "There's a section here about Max," Nathan noted with surprise, turning to a separate document in the folder. The secretary was particularly impressed by the German Shepherd's role in exposing the conspiracy, Harrington explained, bending down. To greet Max properly, the dog allowed the Admiral to pat his head, maintaining his dignified bearing. "He's being awarded an honorary naval commendation for exceptional service, and his official military working dog status is being reinstated with special assignment to Admiral Reed's security detail." Rebecca laughed in delight. "Did you hear that, Max? You're back in the Navy." Max's tail wagged slightly, his intelligent eyes moving between the humans as if understanding the significance of the moment. The German shepherd, who had refused to accept a false death, who had led his family to the truth and protected them throughout the investigation, was now officially recognized for his extraordinary service. "There's one more thing," Admiral Harrington added, his expression growing more serious. "The Secretary has authorized me to brief you on some sensitive information regarding Thomas Blackwood." Nathan's expression hardened at the mention of his former friend's betrayal. "What about him? He was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide, though investigation is ongoing." A heavy silence fell over the group. Despite Thomas's betrayal, he had been part of their lives for decades, and his death represented the complicated final chapter in a painful story. "He left a letter for you," Harrington continued, producing a sealed envelope. "It was verified as non-threatening before I was allowed to bring it." Nathan accepted the envelope, but didn't immediately open it. Some wounds were still too fresh, some betrayals too profound to process quickly. Max moved closer to Nathan, sensing his distress. The German Shepherd's unwavering loyalty stood in stark contrast to Thomas's deception, a reminder that true fidelity existed even in a world of shifting allegiances and hidden agendas. As they moved back to the deck, the autumn sun beginning its descent toward the Atlantic, Nathan finally opened Thomas's letter privately, while the others gave him space. His expression remained unreadable as he absorbed his former friend's final words. "What did he say?" Evelyn asked gently when he finally folded the letter and tucked it away. "That he was sorry," Nathan replied simply. "Not just for the betrayal, but for underestimating what friendship truly meant. He said watching our family reunite made him realize what he'd sacrificed for profit." The wind shifted, bringing with it the salt spray from the ocean below. Max raised his nose to test the air, his senses constantly monitoring their environment, even in these moments of reflection. "Will you accept the appointment?" Rebecca asked, returning to the matter of Nathan's promotion. Nathan looked out over the property that had been his home, the place he'd been forced to abandon for 15 years to protect his family. "Yes," he decided, "but with conditions. My headquarters will be established here in Port Harwick, not Washington. My family has spent enough time separated." Admiral Harrington nodded understanding. The Secretary anticipated that request. "Construction on a secure facility near the naval station here has already been approved." As the details of Nathan's new role were discussed, Max maintained his vigilant presence, occasionally checking the perimeter of the deck as if conducting a security sweep. His military training, temporarily dormant during their protective custody, now seemed perfectly aligned with the family's new reality. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the Reed property. Despite Thomas's death and the complex emotions it evoked, the day had brought them one step closer to resolving the past and securing their future. Nathan's new position would ensure that the Neptune's Echo conspiracy would not only be punished, but would serve as the foundation for reforms that would protect others from similar threats. For the German shepherd who had started it all with his insistent barking at an empty coffin, the circle was now complete. Max had fulfilled his mission beyond anyone's expectations, reuniting his family and helping to expose a conspiracy that had threatened the very institutions his master had served. As night fell over Port Harwick, he settled contentedly between Nathan and Evelyn, his watchful guardianship continuing even as one chapter of their extraordinary story came to a close and another began. 1 year after Nathan's promotion to Rear Admiral, the Reed family gathered in the garden of their Port Harwick home to celebrate what they had come to call their reunion anniversary. The date marked not Nathan's official return from the dead, nor the day Webber's conspiracy was exposed, but the moment they had opened that empty coffin and taken their first steps toward reclaiming their lives. The small, private gathering included only Admiral Harrington and his daughter, Commander Sophia Harrington, alongside the Reed family. Max, wearing a special naval collar with his commendation medal attached, moved contentedly among the guests, occasionally accepting treats and affection while never fully abandoning his protective vigilance. "Hard to believe it's been a year. Already," Commander Harrington remarked, watching Max perform an impromptu perimeter check of the garden. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we were extracting you from that island, and sometimes it feels like another lifetime," Rebecca replied, her new position as head of cybersecurity at Nathan's counter-corruption division having given her a deeper appreciation for just how much had changed in a year. The secure facility near Port Harwick Naval Station had been completed 3 months earlier, providing a base of operations for what had become one of the most respected new divisions within naval intelligence. Nathan's team, carefully vetted and selected for both competence and integrity, had already uncovered and neutralized 2 potential security threats within the naval research community. "The Webber trial goes to the jury next week," Admiral Harrington noted, accepting a glass of wine from Evelyn. "Prosecution believes conviction is all but certain on all counts." Nathan nodded, his testimony having been central to the case. "And Hayes?" "Sentencing next month. His cooperation after the initial charges has been substantial, helped identify 3 previously unknown foreign contacts." Evelyn brought out a cake decorated simply with the words, "Family Reunited," a tradition she had started on the 6-month anniversary of their return to Port Harwick. Max immediately appeared at her side, his nose twitching appreciatively at the scent of vanilla and buttercream. "No cake for you," she told the German shepherd affectionately. "But I did make you these." She produced specially prepared dog treats from her pocket, offering one to Max, who accepted it with dignified appreciation. The conversation flowed naturally between professional updates and personal reflections, the boundaries between the two less rigid than they might once have been. Nathan's counter-corruption division had become something of a family operation, with Rebecca managing cybersecurity and Evelyn serving as a civilian analyst, her experience as both an intelligence professional and the target of a conspiracy providing unique insights. "I received interesting news this morning," Nathan mentioned as they enjoyed Evelyn's cake. "The technology we recovered from Neptune's Echo has been repurposed. The acoustic disruption capabilities that Webber planned to sell to the highest bidder are being adapted for search and rescue operations." "How so?" Commander Harrington asked with genuine interest. "The same principles that could disable sonar can be reversed to enhance detection of submerged structures or vehicles," Nathan explained. "Early tests suggest it could extend our capabilities for locating sunken vessels by nearly 40%. Turning something designed for harm into a tool for saving lives," Evelyn observed. "There's poetry in that." Max suddenly raised his head from where he had been resting near Rebecca's feet, his ears forward and alert. A moment later, the security System chimed softly, indicating a vehicle approaching the property. That would be Special Agent Mercer, Rebecca identified, checking her phone. She's bringing the final deposition documents for next week. The German Shepherd relaxed slightly at the familiar name, but still moved to the garden gate, assuming his customary position to assess any visitor. Though they no longer lived under formal protective custody, certain security protocols had become habitual for both the family and their faithful guardian. Agent Mercer's relationship with the Reed family had evolved from professional protection to something approaching friendship. Her initial skepticism about their request to avoid witness protection had given way to respect for how they had rebuilt their lives while maintaining necessary security awareness. "Sorry to interrupt your celebration," Mercer greeted them as she entered the garden, nodding to Max, who inspected her before returning to Rebecca's side. "But I thought you'd want these right away." She handed Nathan a sealed folder. "And I have news that couldn't wait." The group's attention focused on the FBI agent, who accepted the glass of iced tea Evelyn offered before continuing. "Thomas Blackwood's suicide has officially been reclassified as homicide," she announced. "Forensic evidence finally confirmed what we suspected. He was eliminated to prevent further testimony." Nathan absorbed this information with a complex mixture of emotions. Despite Thomas's betrayal, his murder represented another life destroyed by Weber's conspiracy. "Have you identified who was responsible?" Admiral Harrington asked. "A guard, who disappeared immediately afterward," Mercer confirmed. "We tracked him to Venezuela but lost the trail. However, his financial records led us to something unexpected." She turned to Nathan. "A safety deposit box in Zurich, registered to Thomas Blackwood, with your name listed as the secondary access holder." Nathan's surprise was genuine. "He never mentioned any safety deposit box to me. It was established 15 years ago, shortly after your first disappearance," Mercer explained. "Swiss authorities have secured it pending your availability to open it personally." The implications hung in the air. Thomas Blackwood, even while betraying Nathan to Weber, had established some contingency that included his former friend. "When can we access it?" Nathan asked after a moment. "The State Department has arranged clearance for next week if you're willing to travel to Zurich." Max moved closer to Nathan, sensing the tension the news had created. The German Shepherd's protective instincts remained finely tuned to his family's emotional states. "I'll go," Nathan decided. "Whatever Thomas left there, it's the final piece of this puzzle." "We'll go," Evelyn corrected gently. "Together, remember?" Nathan smiled at his wife's reminder of their pact to face everything as a united family. "Of course, all of us, including Max?" Rebecca asked, half joking. "Especially Max," Nathan replied with unexpected seriousness. "Whatever Thomas left behind, I want our most reliable truth detector present when we discover it." The German Shepherd's ears perked up at his name, his intelligent gaze moving between family members, as if following their conversation. Over the past year, Max had adapted to their new reality while maintaining the specialized training that made him exceptional. His military working dog status had been fully reinstated, complete with updated certification and regular skills assessment, allowing him to accompany Nathan even into secure facilities. As the evening progressed and conversation returned to lighter topics, Nathan found himself watching Max with renewed appreciation. The dog who had refused to accept a false death, who had led them to the empty coffin and changed the course of all their lives, continued to serve as both protector and companion. Whatever awaited them in Zurich, whatever final message or revelation Thomas had left behind, they would face it together, with Max's unwavering loyalty and remarkable instincts to guide them. The sunset painted Port Harwick in hues of amber and gold, the lighthouse beam beginning its nightly vigil over the coastline. From the garden of the Reed home, the view encompassed both the vast Atlantic and the naval station where Nathan's new division operated, a fitting metaphor for a family that had successfully bridged military duty and personal loyalty after 15 years of forced separation. Max completed another perimeter check before settling contentedly between Nathan and Evelyn. His mission evolved but never truly complete. For the German Shepherd, who had started their extraordinary journey with his persistent barking at an empty coffin, protection had become not just a duty, but an expression of the deepest bond between a dog and his family. A bond that had proven strong enough to expose conspiracy, survive betrayal, and ultimately restore what had been broken. The Zurich winter greeted the Reed family with pristine snowfall and crisp mountain air as they arrived at the private banking facility in the heart of the financial district. Max, specially cleared for international travel with his military credentials, walked proudly beside Nathan, his training evident in his alert yet calm demeanor despite the unfamiliar surroundings. Swiss authorities had made extraordinary accommodations for the German Shepherd's presence, recognizing both his official status and his critical role in the international case that had captivated intelligence communities worldwide. Herr Admiral Reed, the bank's security director, greeted them in the private reception area. "We have prepared everything according to protocol. The safety deposit box has remained sealed since Herr Blackwood's representatives established it 15 years ago." Nathan nodded acknowledgement, his expression betraying nothing of the complex emotions this final connection to Thomas stirred within him. Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on his arm, while Rebecca maintained professional vigilance, her cybersecurity training making her instinctively assess their surroundings. "Has anyone attempted to access the box since Blackwood's death?" Nathan asked. "No, Admiral. As instructed by your FBI liaison, we implemented additional security measures once his death was reported. They were escorted through a series of increasingly secure checkpoints, Max passing through specialized scanning equipment designed for canine inspection. The German Shepherd handled each procedure with military discipline, recognizing the security protocols as similar to those he encountered at naval facilities. The vault itself was an impressive display of Swiss engineering and security. Massive steel doors, biometric authentication systems, and armed guards positioned discreetly throughout. The security director led them to a private viewing room where they would examine the contents of Thomas's safety deposit box. "I'll need verification," the director stated formally. Nathan provided his identification and submitted to a fingerprint scan. After confirming his identity, the director departed briefly, returning with a polished metal box, approximately the size of a large book. "We will leave you in privacy," he explained, placing the box on the table. "The room is secure, but not monitored. Please use the call button when you have finished." When they were alone, Nathan stared at the box without immediately moving to open it. 15 years, he murmured. "He established this while actively betraying me to Weber." "Perhaps not everything Thomas did was a betrayal," Evelyn suggested. Gently, Max positioned himself near the door, his training compelling him to maintain security even in this controlled environment. His occasional glances toward Nathan suggested his awareness of his master's emotional tension. Taking a deep breath, Nathan used the key they had been provided to unlock the box. The lid opened smoothly to reveal several items carefully arranged. Inside, a sealed envelope with Nathan's name, a small recording device, a USB drive, and what appeared to be original documents bearing Neptune's Echo letterhead. "He kept physical evidence separate from everything that was seized," Rebecca observed, examining the documents without touching them. "Insurance policy, perhaps?" Nathan lifted the envelope first, breaking the seal to reveal a handwritten letter. Thomas's distinctive script covered several pages, dated just days after Nathan's first disappearance, 15 years earlier. "Nathan," he began reading aloud, "if you're reading this, then one of two things has happened. Either you've discovered my role in Weber's operation, or I'm dead. Possibly both. I want you to know that when this all began, I never intended for it to go so far." Evelyn and Rebecca listened intently as Nathan continued reading, his voice steady despite the emotional weight of his former friend's confession. "Weber approached me 3 years before you stumbled onto the discrepancies in the naval intelligence budget. It started small. Information about procurement contracts, advance notice of technology assessments. Nothing that seemed truly damaging to national security, just profitable for those with the right investments. By the time I realized the full scope of what I'd become involved in, I was already compromised." Thomas's letter detailed how his cooperation had gradually escalated from minor intelligence leaks to active participation in the Neptune's Echo conspiracy. When Nathan had begun investigating the budget irregularities, Weber had immediately identified him as a threat that needed to be neutralized. "I could have warned you," the letter continued. "That's the truth I've lived with for 15 years. I could have told you what was coming, helped you prepare or expose the operation before it consumed both our lives. Instead, I chose self-preservation and profit." Max had settled at Nathan's feet, his keen senses apparently detecting his master's emotional response to the letter. The German shepherd's presence provided silent support as Nathan continued reading. "The contents of this box represent my attempt at partial redemption. The documents include Weber's original operational plans for Neptune's Echo, including the names of his initial financial backers, information not included in the evidence you've been gathering. The USB drive contains account records for all international transactions related to technology sales. The recording is a conversation between Weber and Senator Hayes from before your first disappearance, confirming Hayes's knowledge and approval of the operation from its inception. Rebecca examined the USB drive without connecting it to any device. This could fill remaining gaps in the prosecution's case, she noted, especially regarding the international dimension. Nathan continued reading. "I established this box as insurance, initially to protect myself if Weber ever turned against me. Later, it became a repository for evidence I couldn't bring myself to destroy, but was too cowardly to use against him. I told myself I was being prudent, creating a backup plan. The truth is, I was hedging my bets, maintaining the possibility of redemption without the courage to pursue it." The letter's final paragraphs took on a more personal tone, addressing Nathan directly about their decades of friendship and Thomas's regret over his betrayal. "I watched your family suffer after your death, stood beside Evelyn at your funeral, helped Rebecca with college applications, all while knowing you were alive, in hiding, gathering evidence against an operation I was actively supporting. Those years of deception corroded something essential in me. By the time you returned and began your second investigation, I was too deeply compromised to find my way back." Max raised his head suddenly, ears perked toward the door, but relaxed again after a moment. His training allowed him to distinguish between routine sounds and potential threats, maintaining vigilance without unnecessary alarm. "Your dog sensed the truth about me immediately," Thomas had written, as if anticipating Max's continued role in their lives. "That day when Lucy was barking at your coffin, I saw recognition in her eyes when she looked at me. She knew I was involved in your disappearance. Military working dogs perceive deception in ways humans can't mask. I avoided her whenever possible after that." Nathan paused, looking down at Max with renewed appreciation. The German shepherd's extraordinary instincts had identified Thomas as untrustworthy long before humans had recognized his betrayal. "My final confession is this," the letter concluded. "When you returned from your first death, I was the one who suggested to Weber that we monitor rather than eliminate you. Not from friendship, though I told myself that was my motivation, but because I recognized you might eventually lead us to any evidence you'd hidden before your disappearance. I used our friendship to keep you alive while simultaneously using it to betray you. There is no forgiveness adequate for such a contradiction, but I leave this record and evidence in hopes that it helps complete what you started 15 years ago. The truth, at least, is something I can finally offer. The letter ended with a simple closing. I'm sorry, Thomas. A heavy silence filled the room as Nathan carefully refolded the letter. The final communication from his oldest friend, part confession, part atonement, offered answers to questions that had lingered even after the conspiracy's exposure. He knew the risks of keeping this evidence, Rebecca observed quietly. If Weber had discovered it, that would explain why he was killed in custody, Evelyn added. Someone must have realized he had insurance beyond his testimony. Nathan turned his attention to the recording device, a specialized model designed for long-term storage without degradation. Let's hear what he preserved. The recording revealed exactly what Thomas had described. A damning conversation between Weber and Senator Hayes discussing the neutralization of Captain Reed's investigation and the projected profits from Neptune's Echo technology sales. Their casual discussion of Nathan's planned disappearance, framed as necessary operational security, confirmed the highest levels of premeditation and conspiracy. Max remained attentive throughout the recording, his ears moving slightly as he recognized Weber's voice from their confrontation on the interceptor vessel a year earlier. The German Shepherd's memory for voices and scents was extraordinary, another quality that had made him invaluable throughout their ordeal. After examining all the contents of the box, Nathan carefully repackaged everything for transport back to the United States. The evidence would be delivered directly to the prosecution team handling Weber's case, potentially strengthening what was already considered an airtight case. Thomas was playing both sides until the very end, Rebecca reflected, as they prepared to leave the viewing room. Even his final attempt at redemption was carefully calculated. But genuine, I think, Evelyn added, her analytical mind considering all angles. He could have destroyed this evidence at any point. Nathan nodded slowly. Even in betrayal, he was thorough. The evidence he preserved fills gaps in our understanding of how Neptune's Echo began and who was involved internationally. As they signaled the bank director that they had finished, Max performed one final check of the room, his training compelling him to ensure nothing was overlooked. The German Shepherd's dedication to procedural perfection reflected the military precision that had been integral to exposing Weber's conspiracy. Outside the bank, snow had begun falling again, transforming Zurich's financial district into a postcard-perfect winter scene. The Reed family moved toward their waiting diplomatic transport, Max trotting alongside, his dark fur collecting snowflakes that quickly melted against his warm body. One final piece of the puzzle in place, Nathan observed, watching his breath form clouds in the cold air. After all these years, we finally have the complete picture. What had begun with a faithful dog's refusal to accept a lie, a German shepherd's persistent barking at an empty coffin, had led them through conspiracy, danger, reunion, and now to this final revelation. The circle was complete, the truth fully exposed, justice nearly fulfilled. Max paused momentarily, looking back at the bank building as if sensing the significance of what had transpired within. Then, with the focused attention that had characterized his service throughout their extraordinary journey, he turned forward again, ready to guide his family toward whatever challenges awaited them next. 2 years after opening Thomas Blackwood's safety deposit box in Zurich, the Reed family gathered on the back deck of their Port Harwich home to celebrate Max's official retirement from naval service. The German Shepherd, now 10 years old, had been formally released from his military duties with full honors in a ceremony that had drawn attendance from the highest levels of naval command. A special cushioned bed had been placed in a prime location on the deck, allowing Max to enjoy both the warmth of the summer sun and the cooling ocean breeze. Though still powerful and alert, the signs of age had begun to appear in the slight, graying around his muzzle and a dignified slowness to his movements after particularly active days. "I still can't believe Admiral Jessup presented him with an actual medal," Rebecca laughed, adjusting the framed commendation certificate that now hung in a place of honor in their living room. "He earned it," Nathan replied, watching as Max accepted. A special treat from Evelyn, with his customary gentlemanly restraint. The Navy doesn't often recognize four-legged heroes, but they made the right exception. As evening approached, they moved inside for dinner, Max following at a measured pace. His movement to the stairs was slightly more deliberate than it had once been, but he navigated them with dignity, settling near the dining table where he could observe every family member. Admiral Harrington raised his glass in a toast. "To Max," he said simply, "who taught us all that sometimes the truest loyalty is in refusing to accept a lie." The family clinked glasses, including a special water bowl for Max that Rebecca had tapped with her glass. The German Shepherd acknowledged the tribute with a soft whine and a gentle thump of his tail against the floor. Later that night, as Nathan prepared for bed, he found Max sitting near the window, gazing out at the lighthouse beam sweeping across. The dark Atlantic waters. The German Shepherd's profile was regal against the moonlight, a silent guardian even in retirement. "What do you see out there, boy?" Nathan asked softly, kneeling beside his faithful companion. Max turned to look at him with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom and loyalty of his extraordinary life. From military working dog to family savior, from Coffin sentinel to decorated naval hero, his journey had been as remarkable as their own. Nathan rested his hand on the German Shepherd's strong shoulder, feeling the steady heartbeat of the animal who had changed everything. "Thank you," he whispered, the simple words carrying the weight of all they had endured and overcome together. Max leaned slightly against Nathan's side, his quiet presence conveying more than words ever could. The faithful German Shepherd who had refused to accept deception, who had barked persistently at an empty coffin until someone listened, had not only reunited a family, but had reminded them all of a simple, powerful truth. That loyalty, unwavering and true, could overcome even the most carefully constructed lies. As Nathan gazed out at the lighthouse beam sweeping across the horizon, he reflected on their extraordinary journey. From the moment Max's desperate barking had shattered that fateful morning silence to this peaceful night of celebration and remembrance, their lives had been transformed by the courage and devotion of one remarkable dog. And in the hearts of the Reed family, Max would always remain their greatest hero, the faithful German Shepherd whose bark had revealed the truth that changed everything. If this story moved you, please remember to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary tales of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and their faithful companions. Leave a comment about what touched you most in this incredible journey, and share with others who appreciate stories where truth and devotion triumph against all odds. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful loyalty comes from those who cannot speak, but who show us through their unwavering devotion what it truly means to stand by those we love.